Ba 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 da ba da ba da ba da ba ba da ba ba da ba ba da ba da ba da ba da da ba da ba. Here we go now. The Führer of Marx. I'm basically putting this up because I think it's funny. That's all. I found a funny picture of Marx with the hammer and the sickle on fire. God King Marx. I thought we could all use a good laugh right around these times. It's just so fucking dumb, this whole thing. More and more, it's becoming extremely obvious that the people who are still on the side of the empire are just not going to be convinced. Like, they're just not going to be convinced. I'm having regular conversations now. Like, I'm spreading around Russell Bentley. If you guys don't know Russell Bentley, right? Islam, good evening to you. Good evening to you. I feel like there's a couple of people who we should all be paying attention to. One of them is Russell Bentley, right? Russell Bentley just did a report 14 hours ago. I had to listen to it. He's talking about how the Russian troops are moving into Donetsk. They haven't moved into Donetsk yet. But he's reporting regularly. He says that he's got some raw footage that he wants to be putting up. Hey, Barnabas, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. He's constantly been reporting about he calls what he's experiencing a liberation. Yep, Bentley's being brigaded now. Absolutely, he is. Right? Of course, the death cult is going to go against someone like Bentley because he's reporting on the truth. But the thing is that he's not the only one, right? You've got Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter is a former UN arms inspector. This interview, NATO too weak to face Russia, Scott Ritter. This is from, I forget this guy's name all of a sudden. Medhurst did an interview with Scott Ritter that was very eye-opening. This guy's dead convinced that this war is over in a week. That the fallout from the war will not be over in a week, obviously, but that the warring itself, the fighting itself, that Nazis will be captured, Zelensky will be captured, and the process of trials will begin. That's something that I'm going to be reporting on for sure, the process of the trials, because people need to see, like, these people are Nazis. Like, this is, I never actually thought in my life that the Nazis would come back. Nor did I think my country of Canada, would be actively funding these Nazis. This is an unbelievable story to me that I will absolutely never let go. Like, never let go. We have funded Nazis. The deputy prime minister has been posing with Nazi paraphernalia. Her grandfather is a Nazi collaborator. Our prime minister wears blackface. Like, it's time to start connecting some dots here, kids. And like it's starting to be that the dots are actually like really, really close to one another. Yeah, the Nazis never left. Exactly. We've always had a pretty deep infestation of Nazis. That's true, Islam. That's true. You hate to see them seize power. That's what you really hate to see. And then also, to finish this, you've got Patrick Lancaster. And Patrick Lancaster, in my view, is actually more interesting than Bentley, because Bentley is in Donetsk. And so he's reporting his perspective from within the city, right? And seeing the front line of the Azov battalion and the Nazis there. This guy's walking around Russia talking about what's going on, and he's completely in step with what Ritter and Bentley have been saying. Like, look at this guy, just from this clip here. Like, he's embedded, right? Like, it's unbelievable. Oh, and of course they're recommending me a Vice News with this complete shill. This woman here is a complete fraud. Oh, just like an unbelievable liar. So Patrick Lancaster, Russell Bentley, the Scott Ritter. Thank you, Lonnie. I appreciate that. I do. It's always funny. It's the videos that I feel the weirdest or not the best about that always end up getting the best feedback. Today's video, I started it like 3 times. I felt very like start and stoppy about it. I felt very like, and when it finished, I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. And but that's always the way it is, man. That's always the way it is with creating anything, right? You create something and you look at it, you go, this is shit, and then it's the thing that everyone loves, and you're like, oh well. Like the guy that made the song "She's My Cherry Pie," that song. He made that song in 5 minutes because they told him that he needed like a poppy catch tune for his album. He hated the song. He didn't like playing it, and it was the song that people knew him for and that they loved. So, that's life for you, baby. That's life for you, right? And so as this conflict is going on, what I expect to see is I expect to see the Russians overwhelm the Ukrainians. The reason why it's not going faster is because the Russians don't want to just level everything. They're really, really trying to ensure that they minimize civilian casualties, that they minimize civilian destruction. But it's like a giant walking through a city, right? Like you imagine like a Godzilla-style monster walking through a city. Even if Godzilla is like tiptoeing around and trying to just like reach in and like scoop up a problem spot or something, there's going to be wanton destruction. There's going to be all that kind of stuff. And the Nazis on the ground are doing everything they can to maximize civilian casualties. So Bentley especially is reporting on that the Ukrainian military isn't letting civilians evacuate, that they're keeping them where they are. And this is because they know this is where the Russians are going to come in. I've been seeing pictures of Ukrainian military based in schools, in hospitals, this sort of stuff. So they're trying to maximize the propaganda effort, right? They're trying to make it so that when Russia has to go into a school and destroy the school in order to get these fucking Nazis, they can say, Russia is just destroying. And they've already done this with the Holocaust Memorial. There's a story circulating right now that Russia bombed the Holocaust Memorial that has already been debunked. And it's been debunked by a guy who literally just like walked down to it. He like literally walked to the Holocaust Memorial and was just like, nah. What happened is they bombed a broadcasting tower so that the Nazis couldn't talk to one another. And that's 300 meters away from the Holocaust Memorial. And so people, of course, the propaganda is, they bombed the Holocaust Memorial. And this guy literally just walks down to the Holocaust Memorial and is like, it's fine. Like, it's fine. That got bombed. The Holocaust Memorial is totally fine. Right? Nothing was damaged there. So the propaganda is heavy. The propaganda and that's what I am here to do. I am here to lend my voice to push back against the propaganda effort. One of the fellows who interviews Russell Bentley is convinced that we're losing the propaganda war, and I think that is a concern. That certainly they have the funding, certainly they have the money, certainly they have the long-term energy to continuously push forward their narrative, the pro-war narrative, right? We're talking about the United States military, we're talking about the corporate sector. They have billions and billions and billions of dollars, and they're continuously pushing. But the thing is that we have the truth. That's the difference, right? That it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much effort you put into it. You cannot beat the truth. And the truth will always persevere. And the truth will always be seen. You mean that egghead in his recent videos? Yes. You know who I'm talking about, Ligandese. You know who I'm talking about. Regis, I think his name is. He seems like a nice enough fella. And I mean, certainly there is a contingent of the American populace who is still going along with the support Ukraine line. I mean, obviously, that's true. You can't deny that. And that will continue to persist. And it will shift. As the truth comes out, it will shift. Just like the Iraq War narrative shifted, right? The WMD lie. Like, and they'll land on something like, oh, it was a mistake, or it was an error, or it was an oversight, or it was something like this. They won't actually talk about, like, the moral abhorrence of funding and supporting neo-Nazis in order to foment war. Yeah, it might be Islam. It might be. We'll see how it unfolds. And I'm concerned that Putin is going to lead into we don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine post-Ukraine, right? Like, the only thing that I think is guaranteed is that Putin is going to bring Nazis to The Hague. I think that that's likely. Like, if he's got a brain in his head, and he does, he's not going to hold his own trials, right? He's not going to have it within the borders of Russia. He's going to bring these guys to The Hague. And The Hague is going to prosecute them as Nazi war criminals, right? Like, that's more or less what I expect to see. Scott Ritter pointed out something very interesting in his interview, which he pointed out that in international politics, NATO doesn't actually factor in to the UN, right? That the UN doesn't actually have legislation or a way to deal with the reality that NATO exists. Right, so when the UN is discussing international law, it really is talking about the agreements by individual states, and they don't have an apparatus, and they don't have a international method to actually even discuss the reality of the existence of this federation of bodies, like this NATO organization, which has no reason to exist anymore. Right, like its reason for existing went away when the Soviet Union collapsed. And so now it really just exists to be an imperial force to continue destroying things, right? The online left simping for Ukraine, stand with Ukraine with the flag, so unbelievable. Certain, quote-unquote leftists say that NATO can bring about socialism with the takedown of Russia. Holy shit. That's some crazy shit, dude. Like, that's just straight up copium. That's just like, we've swallowed our own bullshit. That's like taking a shit on the side of the road and picking it up and being like, oh, it smells like roses. Like, it's that level. Like, we can bring about socialism by funding neo-Nazis. Like, say it out loud. We can bring about socialism by funding neo-Nazis. You see how fucking stupid that is? It's the stupidest shit that you can imagine. And a lot of the propaganda right now, like, our job is actually really easy. Our job is actually really easy right now. It's about focusing on the Azov Battalion and the Donbass War and the Ukrainian coup. It really is 2014 Ukrainian coup. Nazis, the Azov Battalion, start shelling Donbass, the Donbass region, right? And Putin attempts to do diplomacy. The Americans ignore him. Like, that is the narrative. And the people who don't want to believe it are... the Hague is not corrupted. The Hague is not corrupted. The United States official policy on the Hague is that they will not cooperate with the Hague, which makes sense, given that they're funding neo-Nazis and all that, right? So, and the Hague very recently prosecuted some African war criminals, right? It's still in operation. It's still doing its job. And I haven't seen anything, and I'll be happy to be convinced, like, if anybody wants to send me any information or anything, but the United States usually doesn't cut ties with organizations it's corrupted, right? And that's essentially what it's done. It's essentially cut ties with it. And like, these Nazi war criminals, if Putin has a brain in his head, he will use the Hague. Because that's the reason the Hague exists, right? Oh, what just happened here? Here, let's move off this. Like, nobody gave a shit when these guys were doing this kind of shit, by the way. Like, there's a reason why the United States is refusing to work with the Hague, right? There's a reason. And because they know that, like, these three men are war criminals. They would be hung, for sure. Like, and their crimes are obvious, and their guilt is plain. Like, you barely need to provide evidence. Like, it's shocking what they've done. Like, and their wars are very strictly wars of aggression. Like, there's no Cassius Belli whatsoever. They literally were just like, Yeah, we just want to do it and get resources and fuck up the region so that other places like they can't develop. Like fuck Iraq, right? And the whereas like there is actually significant debate within the UN about like the legitimacy of Putin's war, right? Like people are saying like, oh, it's a war crime what he's done. It's like, I mean, is it? Like, is a war of isn't a war of liberation completely fine by international standards, right? Like, the if there's like a torture center going on right over there, and you go in and liberate the torture center, it's not a war crime. So there's a big debate going on right now. Yeah, Colin Powell dying peacefully makes me mad. They're all gonna die peacefully, dude. Get used to it. Get used to it. Like this guy's gonna die with a 14-year-old girl straddling him. Like that's how this guy dies. Like he dies comfortably in his bed surrounded by whores. Like that's what happens with this guy. Right? This guy's gonna die on his ranch, right? Like he's gonna die on his ranch surrounded by his own paintings or whatever. And this guy like on his deathbed is gonna have like a celebrity call to I don't know, like whoever the hot new pop star is going to call in and he's going to have like a conversation, and then the day after he'll die, right? Like these guys are going to face zero consequences, like zero consequences for what they've done, right? And we're supposed to, and we're going to look back on their legacy, and the media is going to be like, oh, Clinton, what a leader he was, right? And oh, Bush, a flawed individual, but right? And oh, Obama, yeah. Remember when Obama cured racism, right? Like, no, because Vosh is an imperialist. This is the thing that's beautiful about this moment, okay, guys? Moments like this separate. They are clear dividing lines. Like they are clear dividing lines, right? Like and these sorts of moments are actually brilliant because they really do carve a path through and show who's on what side and who's on the right side. And if you're on the side of Nazis, right? And I actually believe someone like Kyle Kalinske is just sort of a dupe in this. I don't think he knows anything about Donbass. I don't think he knows anything about the Nazis. I don't think he knows anything about what we've been doing. I think that he's just clueless right now. And nobody's like thrust it in his face and been like, comment, and he's been turned to the right. And so I bet you anything that if you turn Kyle Kalinske and showed him like, hey, 2014 coup followed up by shelling of Donbass by literal Nazis integrated into the state apparatus, like no commentary on this. And this moment, in my view, is what separates, right? It is what separates. Like, the pseudo-left is being exposed. And there is a pseudo-left. Vosh has been pseudo-left this whole time, right? Like, he's essentially a Republican, basically. Like, he's essentially a right-wing Republican 40 years ago, right? Like, and people like, I think, like, yeah, Kyle Kalinske has been abysmal with this, but I think he's just clueless, right? And of course TYT is just going to say what the Democrats want them to say. I only listen to Max, JD, you, and some Twitter people. Oh, I'm honored. I am honored. Like, and I think there is a nuance that can be had on the position, like when you get on the side of being against Nazis, right? There is some nuance to be had there and some conversation to be had. But if you're not willing to call the Ukrainian coup a coup, if you're not willing to call the Azov battalion a Nazi battalion, and if you're not willing to say that they've been engaging in a war in the Donbass region for 8 years, if you're not willing to admit those three facts, you're certainly not a leftist. Like, certainly not. You're not progressive. You're not an anarchist. You're not a communist. You're not a socialist. You're none of those things, right? You are at best a liberal, at best, and like these sorts of moments carve a path and show you who's where, right? And like people like TYT and Vosh and more now, looks like Kalinske, right? These guys are imperialists. That's all. That as long, like, they're willing to shake their head and be like, oh yeah, these wars are bad, yeah, but they don't care, right? They only care when someone defends themselves against Nazis. That's all they care about. And so, Abby Martin is not falling off, right? Abby Martin she is trying to figure it out. She is trying to figure it out, and I see her sifting through. But she acknowledges the coup. She acknowledges the Azov Battalion, and she acknowledges and she acknowledges the subsequent war on Donbass. So, like, that already, this is what I'm talking about when I say that there's nuance to be had, right? There is nuance to be had. And Abby Martin is the person who is one of the people who are dwelling within that nuance, right? So, but she's not going to let, like, she has conversations with liberals, and sure, she might say some things that the liberals say, but she's not going to let them off the hook, right? She's not going to be like, oh, well, that completely, you're right, because, oh, yeah, right, what about that coup? What about the literal Azov Battalion Nazi groups? And how about that 8-year war? Like, people keep talking as if Putin started this war. Putin didn't start this war, right? Putin's ending this war. Like, the war has been going on since 2014, right? You just didn't know about it. And isn't that amazing? Doesn't that show you the power of the propaganda system, right? There was a literal war on Russia's border, and you didn't know it existed. Like, literal. There's like a literal war. Hundreds of thousands of troops involved, right? Heavy artillery, the shelling of a city, the Odessa massacre, right? Well, I'm pissed off. I think that Abby doesn't know quite what to think. And she's doing her due diligence, as she's not taking a hard position because she doesn't know where to, like, she's far enough along, she's far enough advanced as a journalist that I think she doesn't want to, like, I can afford to take this position, guys. Like, I can afford to take this position. I can afford to take a strong position and defend it from that position, because if they take a guy like me out, or if something stupid happens to me, it's like it's not really a big fucking deal, honestly. Abby has a lot more to lose. She's a lot more advanced. She's talking to significant people. People view her as a very credible source. She's a powerful actor, and so I understand why she's wading into these weeds delicately, right? Like, and she should. And she should. She's right to do it. She's right to wade into these weeds with some delicacy, like, delicately, right? And because she wants to come out the other side, and she wants to be right. And when Abby Martin walks through weeds, right? Like, we're in the weeds, guys. Let's be completely clear here. And I talk about how, like, Jimmy Dore walks through weeds, right? And when Jimmy Dore walks through weeds, he just goes like this. He just goes like this, and then he turns around and he just goes like this back through the criticism, right? And then he's got a document and he throws it in front of you and he goes, ha! And that's Jimmy Dore. When Abby Martin walks through weeds, she's like a waif that just haunts. She's just like smoothly moving through, like Morticia Adams, floating through the events, listening to people who are credible, listening to people who have spent their lives observing this, taking in information, and then she turns around, and nobody is, like, the people who are criticizing here, they're very light, and there's all this kind of stuff, and she listens to those critics, right? Dore just goes like this through the critics. When Abby Martin turns back around and comes through the critics, she listens to them. She talks to them, and she's graceful, and she says these things and all of this. And then when she comes to the other side, she doesn't throw a document on the table and go, ha! She shows you a 2-hour-long documentary that defends her position and is completely irrefutable. So if Abby Martin wants to steadily tiptoe through the situation and take in information and steadily waft around and all that kind of stuff, we should let her. Because at the end of the day, like 5 years from now, she's going to come out with something that's like, hey, you remember that Ukrainian conflict? Here's the literal truth about what actually happened. And you're going to watch it and you're going to be like, yep, that's right. Yep. Like that's how she's always acted. That's how she's always rolled. It's why I love her deep in my heart. I love her as a person, as a leftist. I wish I could marry Abby Martin. I hate that she has a husband and a kid with that guy. Damn it. But like she is doing. She is ostensibly doing what I am doing, which is trying to find the truth. But when she finds the truth, she needs to absolutely know. Like I can, like, if I fuck up and I go like, oh well, I was wrong, I could just say that to you guys, and you guys will go like, oh yeah, he was wrong, and he admitted it, and now we're moving on with this. It's not how it rolls with Abby Martin. It's not how it rolls with Abby Martin. She wants to be correct, and she has to be, right? She has major seminal works like. Gaza Fights for Freedom is a major work. It is one of the major works on the issue. Gaza Fights for Freedom is an incredibly important documentary, and she cannot afford to tarnish her legacy by being wrong here, right? She can't, and she shouldn't, and she shouldn't be taking strong positions. Why? Because she's already got an anthology of like absolutely critically important things that if she starts misstepping now, they can just say like, oh well, she's so full of shit, look at this, she was wrong here, she was wrong here, she was wrong here. Don't even bother watching Gaza Fights for Freedom, right? Like she has a legacy to protect, and she should, absolutely. So if Abby Martin wants to walk around on eggshells and be a bit delicate about this, she should. Like, we're only like what, 5 days in? Like, she's here for the long haul, and she's a true ally, frankly. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in love with her. Okay. Yeah, NATO created the conditions for Putin to have this power by pushing for the dissolving of the USSR, helping pillage the former Soviet Union, handing power to a weak Yeltsin, toppled by Putin. Well, and not to mention NATO encroachment, right? The Americans have lied about every part of this, right? Like, they literally signed an agreement saying they wouldn't move any further, and then just immediately did. Like, they don't give a fuck. Like, they don't give a fuck at all. They're psychopaths. Like, I don't know what we need to see at this point. Like, I love that suddenly, because, like, it's like white people in Ukraine that are getting bombed. Suddenly, all, like, have we not been paying attention for the last 30, 40 years? Like, has America not been just, like, a psychopath on the world stage? Like, I mean, and when you look at the... When you look at the fucking scale of this, like, this is what gets me, okay? So, we can literally destroy Iraq, encircle Iran, which incidentally, Biden bombs Iran, right? Afghanistan destroyed, we can definitely do that. We can bomb Pakistan. We can maintain a genocide in Yemen, right? We can maintain a genocide over here. We can bomb Jordan. We can bomb Syria, right? So this whole fucking area right here is just a total fucking disaster. We can coup the Egyptian government. We can literally destroy Libya and erect slave markets in Libya. We can bomb Somalia, right? Look, so you're just zooming it out. So this whole area is like active warfare by Americans for like 30 fucking years now. They've overthrown the leadership in like Chad, Nigeria, right? The DRC, right? They're overthrowing leadership all throughout here. Oh, and that's not even to mention all the coups throughout South America. So not only are we active here, destroying everything, overthrowing shit all through this, right? Not only we're doing all of that. Oh, and let's not forget Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, the only people to actually experience nuclear bombardment, right? Oh yeah, the South and North Korean War. Can't forget about that, right? So all of this, right, is what America's been doing. But if Russia if Russia moves to protect this region here against Nazis we fund, he's a war criminal. That's the narrative that I'm being told to buy into. Get completely fucked. Like, get completely fucked. If that's what you're telling me, you can go get fucked. Keep defending Nazis. Like, keep defending Nazis. The United States is the Fourth Reich. Like, let's call it for what it is. Right? This is a rogue state. This is a terrorist organization that is showing it's completely fine. It is totally fine with funding neo-Nazi groups and having those neo-Nazi groups ethnically cleanse Russians. Like, we've seen that that's the case. But if Russia defends itself, oh shit. And what I love about this is, like, everybody said, like, oh, Putin's going in there for the money. He's going to get some resources and all this kind of stuff. What are you talking about? The ruble plummets. Russia gets removed from the SWIFT banking system. He knows these things are going to happen. Like, he knows these things are going to happen. Why do you think it takes him 8 years to finally, like, go, like, okay, because it's a difficult thing, and he knows what the consequences are, right? The map is being redrawn. And there's, if you do the cost-benefit analysis, if that's the only decision-making apparatus you have, that it's all just the money at the end of the day, that there is no such thing as Nazis and defending people because they're being invaded by Nazis, like, that's just not part of the way you think, that it all just comes down to how much money I can make for myself, there's no way he would engage in this, right? The amount that he's going to make, like, first of all, funding the military in order to do it is costly, right? And then getting removed from the banking system, the international sanctions, all this kind of stuff that he knows are coming because he's not a fucking dumbass. Like, there's no way economically he comes out the other side better off, right? Like, it's just not the case, because that's not what this war is. This war is about defending people from Nazis and also reasserting Russia's dominance in the region. Like, the Americans simply weren't listening to him. Like, simply weren't. They were ignoring him. Straight up. And he was doing all kinds of stuff to try to get them to the table and try to get them to be like, hey, like, we're a superpower over here. Like, we got nukes and shit. And they just were not listening. Well, if the only language that the Americans will speak is warfare, then Putin's got to talk their language. He has to, because they're not listening to anything else. Like, they're literally not. It's like what Thomas Sankara said, right? If even Jesus Christ picked up a whip to fight against these capitalists, it's because he understood that was the only language they knew how to speak. Aaron Mate has been on fire these past 3 days. Yeah, Aaron Mate's a great source here. He's been doing good work with Katie Halper. I'll be curious to see when... I haven't seen anything from... the gentleman that worked with Katie Halper that whole time, Matt Taibbi. I'll be very curious to see Matt Taibbi's position on it. He's I think, embroiled in a different project at the moment, so... Okay, here we go. David. Putin was the aggressor in Georgia, though, and in Chechnya. So first of all, the Chechnyan war was ongoing when Putin came to power. So to try to put Chechnya on Putin is not completely fair, first of all. That's more of Yeltsin's fuck up. But the Georgian war, I actually did a deep dive of this a couple of days ago, so thanks for bringing it up. The Georgian war. Right? You see how these lines are sort of drawn here, right? This sort of line, but it's not solid, so it's not actually part of Russia, right? The Georgia war is the same narrative almost as the Ukrainian conflict. The Americans moved in, overthrew the government of Georgia, right? Installed their own leadership in Georgia. The difference was that they didn't fund Nazi groups to start destroying Russians in the region, right? So there's one thing that they didn't do. And also, it was the people of Georgia themselves that rose up against the illegitimate government that was installed by NATO and the United States in what was called the Rose Revolution. And when Putin moved in, it was to aid that that revolution, right? As legitimate as it gets. Like, it doesn't get more legitimate than this. The United States coups the Georgian government, installs its own leadership. The people rise up against it, and Putin moves in to help them. And then proceeds to oversee, along with the UN, legitimate elections, which were completely legitimized by the international community. Like, that's what happened in Georgia. So Putin was not the aggressor in Georgia. 0% aggression. Defending Georgians and are actually erecting legitimate elections after they were couped by the United States government and NATO, so that they could do, incidentally, the same thing. Like, what they're doing in Ukraine it's the same operation. It's what they wanted to do here, right? They just didn't get advanced enough. Whereas this got more advanced, right? Same fucking story. Same fucking story. I'm yet to see a war that Putin is actually the aggressor of. I'm yet to see this. Like, I'm seeing lots of shade coming this guy's way. But if we want to analyze him critically as a world leader, I don't know. So far, so good. Honestly. Like, yeah, he's an oligarch. Yeah, he's a czar, right? But he's not a lunatic. And he's not fucking Hitler, right? And honestly, I feel like if this is how Putin's gonna act, if this is how Putin's gonna be, he's gonna go down in history as one of the great Russian leaders. Like, for real. If this is how he's going to operate, because what he's doing now is he's pivoting. Come on, I had it right in front of me. You guys know me, the trucker convoy. Yeah. Russia is inviting Pakistan, China, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, India, Ethiopia, and other countries in an anti-fascist conference. The Grand Conference aims at combating fascism, to be held in Moscow in the coming months. Right? So this right here is the new alliance that Russia is attempting to erect between these countries. Most interestingly, in my perspective, is that Russia has invited China and India. This right here is the most interesting connection, if you ask me. And Russia knows what's gone on. It understands what's happening. Like, Putin understands what's happening here. Like, he's not a dum-dum, right? He gets that the United States is cutting him out of the global north, right? Because Russia was sort of an in-between. It was the second world, right? That you had the first world, right? And Australia, obviously. The first world here. Russia was the second world. And the rest of the planet, what's called the global south mainly, is considered the third world, and that's supposed to be owned by the United States. Well, the global south is no longer tolerating that arrangement, and America knows it. It's fairly aware of it. And so here's Russia that's acting as something of a corridor between the global south and and Europe, which could pivot Europe towards China in the global south, right, and create a fairly large trade alliance on this continent. And so it needs to cut Russia out. It has to cut Russia out. And this is the method it's chosen to do it. This war for America was completely win-win. Completely win-win. Either Putin does nothing, right? Allows Nazis to take Donbass and destroy the place, and then they take Ukraine, and then Ukraine joins NATO, and then America gets to move into Russia and start to destroy Russia, right? Which is the objective, because they're fucking psychopaths. Either it's that, or Putin fights back, right? Putin does what he's doing now, and they get to cut them out with sanctions. So Russia now is no longer the corridor between China and Europe, right? It can no longer facilitate this arrangement. It's been cut out. The thing that blows me away, guys, about this whole thing is that this war in Donbass was happening, and I try to know what's going on in the world. I try to know what's going on in the world, and I didn't know about this. Like, that's how successful the omission campaign has been. So it's up to us to break it through. It's up to us to break it through. And oh yeah, so if this is successful, like if what Putin is doing here is successful, right? It could create a new trade alliance, right? It could create a new body, and if it's successful, Putin is one of the great Russian leaders. Like, certainly he makes like Yeltsin and Gorbachev and Khrushchev look like assholes in comparison, right? If Russia can manage this pivot and can manage a connection to China and India and like get this whole thing going on, right? And if he can get like some kind of formal agreement between these bodies so that they will actually operate in tandem with one another, it's a huge win. It's a huge win. The world politics has changed over this. Like it's fucking different now. And it's more significant than when the Americans invaded Iraq. Like, when America invaded Iraq, they really tipped their hand and showed everybody that they were bloodthirsty nightmare creatures. That's what they really did with the invasion of Iraq. That they just, like, dropped the mask and let the international community know that, like, yeah, we're basically Nazis. Like, what are you going to do about it, right? But now the lines are being drawn more clearly in regards to who can actually communicate with who, right? Global North, Global South. Russia's part of the Global South. And that's a new arrangement. That's a new thing. Yeah, I think she's trying to learn, yeah, which is amazing. As long as she's learning, it's great. And yeah, and she's going to come out with something really seminal, like really, really, really important. You know, like it's not like fucking me or Dor, right? Where like we drop down a piece of thing and we talk shit, right? Like, she's going to come out with something that you're going to watch and be like, oh, this is like what she creates is going to persist for generations. This is the best way to say it when it comes to Abby Martin. What she creates is going to persist for generations. Me and people like fucking Dor and all that kind of stuff, like, we blow away with the wind. Like, we're if people remember us, it'll be with like a little grin and like oh yeah, what an imp, right? What Abby Martin is creating will persist for generations, right? That her work will exist in collections and museums and human rights thing, like the Human Rights Museum and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's where her work will end up. So she's got to nail it. She's got to stick the landing, right? Like, it's the difference between like me trying, like, doing handstands for my own health, and she's like competing for the Olympics. You know what I'm talking about? Like, she's Olympic level. I'm just a dude doing handstands in my apartment. God, I really am in love with Abby Martin, man. I really am. No one can ever talk shit about Abby Martin in front of me, ever. She's always right. Like, I will need someone will have to put something really hard in front of me to get me to turn on Abby Martin. Anyway. Yeah, Brussels bans any distribution of Russian news portals, RT and Sputnik. So much for free speech, right? So much for free speech, right? It's all and this, Mocked, these bans, in my view, are the most condemning of our regime. We keep saying Putin needs to do diplomacy while silencing him and walking out of the room and not listening to him, right? Like, it's so hysterically hypocritical. Putin needs to do diplomacy. Oh, by the way, we're not going to talk to him, nor are we going to listen to him. And when he talks, we're going to walk out of the room. and oh, we're going to ban any distribution of information that comes out of Russia, right? Like, that's psychotic. This is psychotic behavior that we're looking at. This is gaslighting, what we're looking at. And, like, we're essentially forcing this to occur. Like, we could make this not happen. We could easily make this not happen. Stop funding neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. Don't let Ukraine join NATO, right? Maintain its independence. Let it act as a corridor of peace between Russia and Europe. But that's not what America wants. America doesn't want Russia to have a corridor into Europe, because America knows that if it allows that corridor to continue, eventually the Europeans are going to realize that the dead weight in the relationship is the Americans. Right? Like, the Americans are fucking dead weight. Like, they bring everybody down. Everybody. No exceptions. Like, and if Europe suddenly starts to go like, hey, wow, China is stable, right? Russia seems stable. These places seem to be good trading partners. Wow, look, these guys are actually building up. They're actually building rail and building trade and building, like, and oh my God, what if China goes on like a cultural building tour and starts to build up cultural wonders and starts to, because China's done that before, right? What if they start making the place look cool and start like making everybody nice and happy and everything's sweet and cool? Well, and then Europe turns over and looks at America and it's just like still in fucking Hickland being like, we need a freedom, I'm not gonna wear a mask because I'm gonna break the... Like, Europe's gonna pivot. I think you'd have to be crazy not to think that Europe's gonna pivot. And so America is, like, I keep imagining it as if it's like you're in a neighborhood, right? And there's this like cute little blonde woman named Erica, right? Who sells flour for $5 a pound. And then down the street, there's a little Asian woman, right? An ancient old Asian woman, right? Who sells flour for 50 cents a pound, right? And there's and there's like a matronly woman called Brittany, right? Or whoever, whatever stands for Europe. I need a good name for Europe. But anyway, and this woman here keeps trying to talk to Erica, but Erica's a psychopath. And she keeps like blowing up and showing how crazy she is. And so this woman keeps turning over to the ancient old Chinese woman, who every time they interact, it's a lovely conversation and the exchange is very nice and she's very like gracious. And she looks in her house and it's all orderly and clean. And then she turns and looks at Erica's house, and Erica's house is just like an explosion of shit and vomit everywhere. There's like one room that's like high tech and super amazing, but her kids like literally live in their own shit. And Erica's just constantly like in a VR world, just being like, yeah, I'm the best. And then, unbeknownst to Brittany, Erica is constantly walking over to like this old Chinese woman and just like poking her in the eye every chance she gets. She's just walking over to her, poking her in the eye every chance she gets. And then suddenly, the old ancient Chinese woman like loses it and just starts like hitting Erica with like a stick. Like, and she's good at it because she's fucking like an ancient Chinese like warrior type. So she just beats this shit out of Brittany and then or out of Erica. And then Erica turns to Brittany and she's like, look at what this woman did. She's so horrible. We can't talk to her. We can't talk to her anymore. And so Brittany agrees because this is her main ally, and she looks sort of longingly over as this woman, you know, takes her flour and starts selling it to other people. And then Brittany looks at Erica and is just like, okay, well, I need flour. And then Erica holds out her hand and says, $5 a pound, please. Like, that's what's happening, man. Like, it's insane what's going on. Like, it's insane what we're seeing. Like, America is a crazed, psychopathic, 14-year-old, like, blonde Harley Quinn type. Like, that's how it operates. And it's destroying Ukraine, and it's sacrificing Ukraine so that it can get Europe under its wing, so that Europe won't pivot over to China. Like, it's intense. It's intense what they're willing to sacrifice. And here's where it gets crazy. If they're willing to murder Ukrainians for this, they are absolutely willing to murder you. Abso-fucking-lutely. Like, they don't give a shit about you. They don't care about you at all. Look what they're doing to the Ukrainians. Look at what they're willing to do. Right? They don't give a fuck. So, and this whole, like, stand for Ukraine, like, what the fuck are you talking about? We don't stand for Ukraine. We don't give a shit about Ukraine at all. This whole stand with Ukraine. If you wanted to stand with Ukraine, you'd stop the encroachment. You'd literally stop funding neo-Nazis. You'd stop warring in Ukraine. But you don't give a fuck about Ukraine. You like all of them, all the stand with Ukraine stands. Fuck all of them. They don't care about Ukraine at all. It's just performative. Like, it's just performative. And there's a good amount of people who are in that movement who are just like, please God, no nukes. And those people are the most legitimate. Like, that makes sense. Yeah, stand with Ukraine because I don't want to find nuked. But okay, at least that's kind of honest. Like, I don't want to get nuked, right? Did you see what happened to Pfizer today? Side effects got leaked online with the Texas documents and their stock market plummeted today. It's really bad. I mean, good. Fuck them. New Pfizer data shows the vaccinated suffered about 13 times more often from fever, chills, and pain than the placebo unvaccinated group. Honestly, dude, fuck Pfizer. Like, I'm completely fine if a private corporation of any type anywhere in the world gets completely fucked over. Like, I'm absolutely fine with this. Like, get fucked, Pfizer. Get fucked. I hate it that it jumps down there. Oh, David, who is Abby Martin? David, I envy you. I actually do. I actually envy you, bud. Go to Google, or not Google, YouTube. I think her most seminal work is Gaza Fights for Freedom. Yeah, Gaza Fights for Freedom. Yeah.
Caused by contaminated.
If you watch Gaza Fights for Freedom, like if you watch this from start to finish, and you come out the other side still pretending as though the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is a both sides conflict, right? If you come out the other side still believing that this is a both sides conflict where Hamas and Israel and all this and you know, blah, 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 then you're a fucking psycho. Like, that's the bottom line. Like, Abby Martin has created what I consider to be the seminal source. It's loaded with historical documentation. It's loaded with information. She gets into Gaza. It's boots on the ground. She documents the day-to-day life of the citizens of Gaza. She documents the warfare that is going against them by the Israeli state. Like, it is thorough, it is powerful, it is undeniable. Abby Martin's work, Gaza Fights for Freedom, like this, should the Palestinian-Israeli conflict ever resolve, should there ever be an end, the Gazans will use this as one of the documents in their, like, Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. Like, it is that powerful. And if you don't know who Abby Martin is, boy howdy bud, you're in for a treat. You are. You're in for a real treat. She's a powerful leftist. A powerful leftist. As important as someone like Chris Hedges or Cornel West. As important, for sure. And she's kind of just getting started, honestly. Like, what does a 70-year-old Abby Martin look like? Right? Yep, America's updated ban on books is concerning. Yeah. Will Pizza Hut pull out of Russia now? Pizza Hut will never pull out of Russia. Pizza Hut is embedded in the ethos of the Russian people now. When Gorbachev was on their commercial, that was a merger of their cultures that can never be torn apart. Yeah, and oh yes, that's right. Thank you, Eric. YouTube channel is Empire File. Yeah. Really, 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 really good shit. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm actually jealous of you right now, David. That you're just going to be encountering her. Also, P.S. Like, let's be really clear, okay? I know I say this a lot, guys, and I'm sorry, but she is such a babe. Like, come on, man. Like, this killed. Oh, her podcast with Joe Rogan was very strong, very, very strong. If you want to see just Abby Martin who she is, this is a great moment. Her and Joe Rogan. Yeah, here's her with her husband, Mike Preisner. Mike Preisner, a former Iraq war vet who is now an anti-war advocate. These two married, have a kid. Mike Preisner. Oh, yeah. So seek out and find Abby Martin. Powerful actor in this conversation. Powerful. How can Russia do diplomacy when the West walked out of UN? Yeah, when the Russian ambassador was speaking at the UN. Yeah, exactly. Like it's so hysterically hypocritical. Do I have to pay to get into the Discord? Yeah, it's $1. Send $1 my way. No, or more, right? And if you're only donating at the dollar level now, maybe think about making it $2, right? Reach it all up, right? It's I'm almost paying my rent. Not with the channel, but with like everything I'm doing right now. I'm doing the cafe work, I'm doing the audiobooks, I'm doing this channel, and I'm almost paying my rent. I have 3 jobs, and I'm almost paying my rent. What a fucking world we live in. What a fucking world we live in. Yeah. Thanks, David. Right? The West just pours fuel on the fire while demanding someone else put out the fire. Yeah, exactly. And while pretending like they're not putting fuel on the fire. Right? Like, and then also, when someone goes to put out the fire, they call them a fucking war criminal. Are you okay, teacher? Yes. Can you retell that story about the women are welders? Just, I assume, like, dude, if Abby Martin was also a welder, just imagine her with, like, the little, like, the thing, right? Okay, I gotta stop talking this way, because it's just, I worry that I'm alienating my female base. And I just want you guys to know that I respect and honor Abby Martin as a person, but goddamn. Okay. Ukraine is the only ex-Soviet state to get poorer post-independence. Yeah, that's true. Latvia, Estonia, Finland have gotten higher GDP and more money and welfare than Ukraine. Huh, wonder why. Can't imagine. Yeah, Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in Europe. I mean, for God's sakes, it's being led by a clown. It's being led by a fucking comedian. Right? Like... Zelensky comedy. Like, if you sift through all of the bullshit about this guy, you can find clips of this guy just like on night shows. Right? He's like a stand-up comedian. Here's the leader of fucking Ukraine. It's gonna be in Ukrainian, but...
А мы рады приветствовать вас, собиратели, специально только для русских. Да, именно для вас. У нас...
Look, and I'm not trying to say there's anything fundamentally wrong about him being a comedian, but, like, the country is led by a fucking clown. Like, look, just look at how this guy is. Like, just put a fucking red nose on this guy. Right? We're set, and we're off to the races. Right? Like, the country is led by a literal clown. Have you seen the John Pilger denouncing the West in Ukraine? No. John... first of all, I don't know who John Pilger is. Denouncing the West, Ukraine. This is half hour, so I'm not gonna...
Russia.
Oh, wait, I've heard this guy referenced. Chomsky references this guy all the time. Yeah, okay. I'll look into this. For sure. Hey, I got a new subscriber. Look at that. See what's happening to me, guys? I'm getting a lot of Chinese guys, and I'm down. I'm down. Welcome aboard. Come on in, guys. Come on in. But like the Rising Sun, Dashu, Yang Chen, like, fuck. I love China. Okay, I gotta get Abby off the screen because she's just killing me. Okay. I value the nuance you bring. It's not all pro-Ukraine or pro-Russia. Well, yeah, I mean, like, Putin is a Tsar. Like, that's the thing that makes this so, like, this is so wild, guys. Like, let's really, like, revel in the moment of just, like, America is run by an oligarchy that pretends it has a democracy, that its democracy exists to the extent that the oligarchs understand they should negotiate with each other, right? So you've got this, like, oligarch-run democratic structure that's designed to maintain the power of the oligarchy, and that's the United States, right? And then you've got, like, literally a Tsar, like, the king of Russia, right? Like, walking around being like, hello, I am the king of Russia. And he is. Like, he is. That's wild. That's wild. Like, people call Putin an oligarch, and I'm like, he's not an oligarch. He's a Tsar. Right? And because we live in sort of this post-monarchical world, right? Because we live in a world where, like, the monarchies of England and of Europe have somewhat been cleansed out, right? They're still there in edifice and presentation, but not in terms of power as much. But here is a country that is literally like, no, I'm a king. Like, I'm a Tsar. And our brains just can't really put that together. We can't really be like, there's a literal king in charge of Russia. And I don't know, dude. Like, I gotta be honest. Like, if I compare Putin to other Russian leaders, and if I compare Putin to other European monarchs, I kind of look at him and I'm like, I don't know. Seems fair. Like, he doesn't seem crazy. Like, he doesn't seem crazy by any stretch of the imagination. When he makes decisions, it's clear he's planning and then acting decisively, right? That's very clear. He's obviously got some thuggish tendencies about him, and really wants to be that, like, alpha male type, right? And certainly seen that way. Yeah, like, Putin is a fascinating figure. He's a fascinating figure. And what he does now, what Putin does now in regards to what happens in Ukraine is going to speak volumes to where he stands as a leader, right? That if he just devolves the situation into chaos, or if he tries to just seize all of Ukraine, if the Machiavellian tendencies take over, like this sort of stuff, right? Because this could all turn. This could all turn against him, and it can, right? Like, we don't know what Putin's going to do. Like, for all we know, Putin's just going to start pushing into fucking Finland, right? Like, for all we know, Putin's just going to kick this off. He's going to move into Poland, right? He's going to move down into Kazakhstan. He's just going to go for it, right? He could. He definitely could, right? So, like, but he hasn't. And so what happens next is really what's going to matter to me. Like, I feel like what he has done in Ukraine has a justification. I actually think that he has met the international community's own guidelines for when war is acceptable. I think that what he is doing is defending Russians against Nazis. Like, I think that has legitimacy to it. What happens next? We'll have a debate about it. It'll be fun. But if it's anything like what happened in Georgia, right? He'll get hold of Zelensky. He'll get hold of the Nazis, right? He'll take them down to The Hague. He'll move out. Probably Donbass will become its own independent territory, right? And he'll interact with it very much like Belarus, right? Where there's like a loyal base. He'll oversee democratically elected elections. He'll let the UN come in. They'll have elections here. Same with Ukraine. They'll have democratic elections that the UN will verify, right? And say that these were legitimate. Like, this is not a Putin puppet. This is somebody who was actually elected by the people of Ukraine. Wouldn't be too surprised if Putin wanted more territory, though, honestly. Like, for him, this is militarily, strategically important land. Like, that's the reason why he's doing it the most. This is militarily important strategic land. He simply cannot let military forces, NATO military forces, to get here. He simply can't let that happen. And I think if you think otherwise, you're nuts. Like, you're just nuts. Like crazy go nuts. I don't know how you put your shoes on in the morning crazy. Like, no, he should not allow NATO forces to be able to get to his border and shoot rockets at Moscow. Like, no, bro. Like, we know what NATO is. Like, we know what it is. It's a psychopath. Like, we know what it is. No, don't let it come over here. Like, real clear, obvious shit. And, like, that's the thing that baffles me the most about this whole fucking conversation. The thing that, like, just kills me the most is that people refuse to look at it on, like, a basic common sense. NATO exists to destroy Russia. Right? The Soviet Union is what it was erected to defend itself against. Well, the Soviet Union collapsed. What's left? Russia. So NATO exists to destroy Russia. That's its stated objective. Right? You think it's cool if they can just move troops right over here. Right here. You think that's totally rational. That Ukraine should just be able to join NATO and put troops all along this border here. Like, you don't need to have a big conversation about it. You're fucking nuts if you think that's acceptable. Like, you're fucking out of your mind crazy. Like, if you are anti-war, you should absolutely be against this. Like, that is bonkers what you are saying, right? It's bad enough that, like, these nations here are actually part of NATO, but this has been tolerable because of the relationship with Belarus. So if they actually did start to move troops in here to threaten here, well, Putin can cut them off, right? Like, this area here, he can just cut them off and fuck them up. So they don't do it. This here? Nah, bro. Like, no. And you, like, no one should want that. The people who are saying that Ukraine should just join NATO are either fucking morons or, like, actually bloodthirsty psychopaths. Like, Nazi-level psychopaths. Like, that's what we're talking about here. Like, no. That Ukraine should remain neutral. It should neither join the Moscow Federation, nor should it join NATO. And it should operate as a corridor of peace between these two forces, who, incidentally, are in opposition by definition, because NATO exists to destroy Russia. The true resolution to all of this is to be done with NATO. Just get out of NATO. Dismantle NATO. Like, why does it exist? It exists to do exactly what it's doing now, which is foment war. Senior advisor to U.S. President Joe Biden, Cedric Richmond, says the United States is not prepared to impose sanctions on the oil imported from Russia. So it's all bullshit, right? Like, it's like when Trudeau stood up and said, "We're banning Russian energy imports." Well, we do about $250 million of energy imports into Russia, right? Like, $250 million. It's basically nothing. Like, it's basically nothing. Like, we don't actually give a shit about that at all. It's like, we won't notice it, really. Not really. Like, maybe we'll have to turn and get energy from somewhere else, but even if it's double the amount, then it's $500 million. Like, it's fucking nothing, right? Like, $500 million, like, Canada has an $8 trillion economy. Right? So it's all fucking performative. Right? And Joe Biden said it in his State of the Union address. He was like, we're going after those Russian oligarchs and we're going to take their luxury cruisers and we're going to take this. Like, okay. Like, who gives a fuck? Like really? Like, who actually gives a fuck? If they're not going to cut off the oil imported from Russia, then it's all just fucking fluffy talk. It's all just bullshit. Right? Russia's going to keep making money by trading its oil into Germany. Germany's going to keep paying for that oil. It's going to keep doing it. Why? Because it has to. Are you kidding me? Do you know what would happen in Germany if they cut that oil? If they cut the gas pipeline? Or do you know what would actually happen in Germany? There would be a fucking revolution. People would overthrow the place. Like, you can't just turn people's heat off. Like... How do those Pfizer stats compare to Moderna? Running gags are always the best. Dmitry Lascaris has been on fire too. Yes, Dmitry Lascaris has been good on this, which is good because it's nice to know that there's actually a potential socialist who could actually become part of the political apparatus in a serious way. Like, if Dmitry Lascaris does not become the leader of the Green Party, then the Green Party is dead, in my perspective. Like, it had one chance to get him in, right? And they waffled over to Anne-Marie Paul, who's essentially just a neoliberal and was not up to the task. Anne-Marie Paul, I'll always say this about her. She was 10 years too late. Like, if she had to become the leader of the Green Party 10 years ago, I think people would have been like, yeah. Too late. The neoliberal period is over. Right? When you've got Joe Biden saying in his State of the Union address that trickle-down economics doesn't work, even if he's only, like, that's just an acknowledgement, right? That doesn't mean he's going to change anything he's going to do, right? But the very fact that he's acknowledging it heralds the end of the neoliberal period, right? Like, you don't just get to say that trickle-down economics doesn't work and then not have there actually be fallout from it. And but it very much is just like acknowledge and then do nothing. The way that Trudeau acknowledges climate change and then does nothing about it. I banned straws, you guys. Yeah, paper straws. We're doing it. I can't stand the people I see on Twitter with the huge line of Ukrainian flags in their name now, like an icon is going to stop Putin. Well, and I mean, like, I kind of understand it because it is just an expression of their internal angst. Because the only reason Westerners care about this war is because of the nuclear threat. Like, that really is the truth. That if, like, America can invade all this and do all that kind of stuff and everybody's just like, that's fine. They're not nuclear. America can do whatever it wants to these people. Also, they're brown, so who cares, right? Like, as long as America is limiting its warfare, and as long as warfare is limited to a nuclear power bullying a non-nuclear power, Americans are fine with it. Westerners are fine with it. We don't care. Not really, right? What makes this far more concerning, right, is that it is a different nuclear power, which is Russia, invading a region that Americans know we've been fucking in. Like, this is the thing that nobody wants to really admit and talk about. There are lots and lots of Westerners in the conversation who are happy we cooed this government, who are pleased that we did this, right? Our wars are good wars. Like that, there are lots of people in the conversation who are like this. And they know that what is happening in Ukraine is American meddling. They know it's American meddling. And they're happy about that. They like American meddling, right? And so they know that when Moscow moves in and starts to fight Ukraine, that it is a confrontation with America, which is also a nuclear power. And so this is why people are in a tizzy, because there's nukes in the conversation, right? And so what are they doing? Right? They're expressing their internal mortality and their internal anxiety about their mortality. Stand with Ukraine. Right? Like that's, and that's as far as they've gotten. Like that's as far as they've gotten. Like there's a big contingent of the Stand With Ukraine crowd that I'm actually like pretty sympathetic to, because you essentially have a group of people who have not been paying attention at all, and war has been normalized in their lives, so they no longer pay attention to it. Suddenly kicking up into like, oh shit, nukes, Russia, Putin, bad man, same as Hitler, right? Like that's what's happened to them. Like the energy hasn't gotten out of their balls yet, right? Like, you guys know me, right? I got the chakra thing in the background here. I gotta get a light on it one day. It'll be better in the summer, right? They're just in their balls. Like that's it. Like energy starts in the root, right? It starts where your genitals are, right? And it moves up, right? And you'll notice in the chakra system, right? That means that the energy hits your mouth before it hits your brain. So stand with Ukraine, right? And all of this information actually hitting your brain so it can process happens after. I paused Dark Souls 2, Googled her, man. I already believe that Israel is worse than the Third Reich. I mean, all right. The Abbey vid starts 3 minutes in. Coming from John, actually watching it. Confirmed John for a true speaker. Amazing. Thoughts and prayers to Ukraine. Exactly. What was the thing? There's a couple of semantic similarities. So when liberals say Russian propaganda, that's how they say fake news. When leftists say both sides are bad, we stand against imperialism, generally, that's how they say thoughts and prayers, right? That leftists stand up and say we are against war on principle, and war always goes against the working class and hurts regular citizens, which is all ostensibly true. But the trouble that anti-war types are confronted with in this situation is the reality that, well, what do you do if you have an aggressor, the United States and NATO, destroying civilians on your border, using literal Nazis, and they refuse to talk to you? Like, the anti-war movement doesn't want to admit that there is a Kobayashi Maru, right? They don't want to admit that their position doesn't work in certain circumstances. And they don't want to actually move forward and have a critical faculty or a critical position when those conditions are finally met, right? Like, that's the reality of the anti-war position. I sympathize with it. I myself am anti-war. I think that war is bad. We should not do war. But I acknowledge that there is a Kobayashi Maru. That there is a situation in which war is not only an inevitability, but also necessary and also right. And if you're not going to say that Nazis shelling your people on your border meets those criteria, then that's a conversation that we should have. I don't want to condemn people for this, right? Because, like, that's the conversation that's happening on the left. That's the legitimate conversation that's happening on the left, right? Like, the pseudo-leftists have revealed themselves, right? They're off being the pseudo-left, being all like Putin's a dictator, and there's a unprovoked war, like all that kind of stuff, right? Oh yeah, the Nazis invading Donbass, that doesn't exist, right? Like that's the pseudo-left. The legitimate conversation that exists on the left is between the anti-war movement, which is a respectable position, completely understandable, and people like myself who are saying, okay, but like that dissipates, that becomes a fantasy at some point, right? That it doesn't work. It doesn't actually function, right? Like, what do you do when a faceless, silent enemy is destroying you? You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to fight back. You have the right to do that. And I am of the opinion that criteria has been met. and that Putin is not only morally correct in what he has done, he is even acting within the confines of international law. Like, I am completely on side with this particular action, and this is where people struggle, because people will say to me that, oh, you're just a Putin simp. It's like, not really, but like, I call it how I see it, and if Putin steps out of line, if Putin starts doing things that I disagree with, I'll talk about that too, as you should. Right? It's the same conversation that happens with Xi Jinping, right? People will say things like, what was the great one? This troll kept coming in and saying, Xi Jinping joined the TTP and that means that he's a traitor and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, not really, bud. Like, not really. Like, we can critique him, but like, it doesn't mean he's destroyed his people or his legacy or anything like this. Anyway. I'll watch it after the stream. Dude, yeah, look forward to it, man. Smoke a doob while you do. Like, really relax into it. Or have a drink or something. Oh, is it like that, Barnabas? I'll change that. I think I can change that. I didn't know. Thanks for letting me know. See, I don't even know what I'm doing with the behind the scenes stuff, guys. Like, when it comes to the tech, it's a fucking miracle that I'm even doing this stream. Like, for real. It's a miracle that this works. That's why, like, people say to me, like, hey, John, you could do, like, multicast on Twitch as well. And I'm like, okay, if you say so, friend. If you say so. I got this working. Right? I literally feel like back in the 80s, you would have like a coat hanger trying to catch the signal so that you could get like a channel that you wouldn't normally get, right? And you like stand there and like go like this with like two fucking like trying to get the signal. Putin can redo the Pizza Hut commercial in reverse, and he closes the Pizza Hut. That's hilarious. Zelensky is a WEF Davos backed, by the way, just let you know. Yeah, just like Trudeau. Yeah. And what makes this interesting is that Putin also has gone to these WEF Davos things, right? Like, that's how you know this is quite serious, is because it's not along those lines as much. To be fair, he stayed to fight while Ted Cruz fled a snowstorm. Gotta be the fair guy. Like, all of the pictures that you've seen in Zelensky wearing the military gear came from a 2001 inspection. Like, he's not on the front lines. Like, this narrative that he's on the front lines is so embarrassing. Posted his tweet on Discord. Azov, Ukraine's most prominent ultranational group, sets its sight. Wow, you know it must be serious because Radio Free Europe is reporting on it. Yeah, the media is lying. Yeah, good. The U.S. is sending millions of dollars worth of arms to Europe's only openly neo-Nazi-infested country, while Britain trains Ukraine's neo-Nazi-infested National Guard, and the regime lays siege to Russian-speaking Donbass. That's from The Intercept. Wow. Good find, dude. That's going to be a really powerful article. That's going to be a real powerful article. Wow, I'm looking forward to that. Facts that won't be mentioned in Western media. The CIA staging a coup in Ukraine in 2014. The U.S. arming neo-Nazi militias in Ukraine. Kiev's daily shelling of Donbass citizens. Kiev refusing to implement the Minsk agreements. NATO lying to Russia about its eastward expansion. Yeah. Sarah Abdallah nailing it very quickly. Very quickly. Right? I've been... One of the things that's really important as we disseminate this information, right, is... I've been seeing lots of people complaining about how it's like, it's like I need to lead up with a half-hour conversation with people on all this. And it's like, we got to find ways to make it faster. We've got to disseminate this information faster. I'm trying my little heart out, right? It's unbelievable. Thanks for sharing that, Eric. I'm definitely going to take a look at that Intercept article later. He went to school to be a lawyer, so he's more than an actor. I think of him as a Trudeau-esque kind of figure. Man, this is a wild head. I mean, okay, like he went to school to be a lawyer, just like what's his name? Come on, the Asian fellow from Community. Why am I forgetting his name? Asian man from Community. Yeah, there he is. Right? Like, this guy's a doctor, and then he became a comedian, right? So imagine, like, this guy became the president of the United States, backed by the CIA and all that. Be a very similar sort of thing. Yeah, Ken Jeong, right? Like, they would, America would cheer, first Asian prime minister or president, right? And it'd be like a huge thing, and then, like, let's fund some neo-Nazis. Oh, he can't be a Nazi, he's Asian. Right? Same fucking narrative, same thing. This Zelensky can't be a Nazi because he's Jewish. Like, shut up. Like, there's never been a Jewish Nazi collaborator. Like, that just didn't ever happen in history. Like, unbelievable. Texan Republican quits U.S. House race, admits affair with former ISIS war bride. How is that? Look, Jesus Christ. What? Dude. I mean, if you're gonna go big, you go big, right? Does Trump seem to support Russia? That's what I want to know. He does, actually. Like, he has called Putin a genius, right? All that kind of stuff. Trump is, well, and this is what always gave credibility to the Russiagate people, is that Trump admires Putin. Like, and there's no other way to say it. Like, there's no other way to say it. He admires Putin. I really do think that Trump looks at Putin and thinks, I could do that. I really do think, like, I could become king of a country, right? I really think that is Trump's MO, and that's, like, Trump looks at Putin and goes, how do I become king of America, right? And like, I think that Trump also, at least to his base, Trump was very like, he gets elected on an anti-war message, right? Like, Trump elects elected on an anti-war message. He basically ascends through the ranks of the Republicans by destroying the neocons, right? That Trump within the Republican sphere is a rejection of the Bush era neocon elite who led America into war in Iraq. Like, one of the things that's really interesting about Donald Trump is that he didn't actively expand the war. He bombed places for sure. Like, for sure he bombed the shit out of places. But he didn't actively expand the war like Biden is, right? Like, it's the Democrats who really expand the war. Although, I mean, it's the Republicans who fucking start the shit out of the war. But more, like, Trump has said that we should dismantle NATO, right? Like, Trump has said that we should stop this craziness. Because one thing that I think Trump really understands is that trade is better than war. And Trump doesn't really have any investment in the war machine, right? Trump is a real estate agent. Trump is a real estate developer, right? He builds shit. So I think to him, there's sort of this natural impetus to want to continue building shit. You know, build shit so you can put your name on the side of it, right? And this isn't, I'm not trying to say that I'm on side with Trump. Like, believe me, I think he's just like a fucking boob, but like just another clown, essentially. But it's interesting that, like, the battle lines are being drawn in American politics so sharply, right? It's very rare to see, like, the leader of one party being anti a leader and the other leader being pro that leader. Like, that's fair. Like, that's very unusual. Like, it's usually more gradient than that, right? I'm assuming it's also propaganda. Couldn't find anything on it. No, I mean, you can literally go to like Trump himself. Like, he's very open. Like, he's very open about his opinion of Putin, right? Like, that's what gives the Russiagate scandal its gasoline. That, like, while there isn't any evidence to show that the Russians actually did collude in order to mess with American elections, I mean, even if they did, you're telling me your election system is so fucking weak that it can't figure out, like, a Russian king is meddling? Like, come on, get fucked. So there's no actual evidence of that, and that's been widely debunked, which has turned the Russiagate people into just like nut jobs, like Alex Jones types. Like Rachel Maddow is no different than Alex Jones in my view, just conspiracy nuts. And but the thing that really, like, anytime Trump stands up and praises Putin, which he does in public regularly, including at the beginning of this conflict, where he took a very hardline pro-Putin stance and literally called Putin a genius, like, that pours a lot of gas on that fire, man. That pours a lot of gas on that fire and really ramps up the conspiracy nuts and really ramps up the Russiagate thing. Because, like, this war more than any other war... Well, I shouldn't even say that. That's not accurate. This war is senseless, but all of them are senseless. Right? I was about to say that this war more than any other war is senseless, and I'm like, no, that's incorrect. All these wars are fucking senseless. They only make sense if you're a total psychopath. Like, they only make sense from that perspective of just like, yeah, it makes sense to go into Iraq and destroy it for oil. Like, Jesus Christ, man. That is how America would sound if it was a person, right? Yeah, we should go into Iraq and destroy it and get their oil, and then we'll go into Afghanistan and we'll be greater as liberators. Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. I don't like Putin. I prefer Nikolai Platoshkin. Have you read his For a New Socialism Plan for 2024? Oh, yeah. There's a reason why there's a coalition of progressives and old communists that are starting to become the most powerful political opposition to Putin. And I've seen credible sources that say that part of the reason why Putin is moving forward and doing what he is doing against these fucking Nazis is because the opposition is so in favor of it, right? Like the old communists fighting Nazis, absolutely. And what's so interesting about this sort of moment is that, like, people are trying to peg Putin with, like, this is why, right? When it's probably all of it. Like, there's a lot of reasons and there's a lot of rationale, right? And that's what makes a human complex, is that humans have lots of reasons and lots of modes, and some of these things actually contradict one another, right? It's why dealing with yourself is actually the most difficult thing to do, because you have elements inside of yourself that contradict one another, right? And that's just built into the existence of being a human being. And so when you're analyzing someone like Putin, it's very dangerous to be like, so for example, like, what was I even talking about? Like, even the good position, right? He's going in to fight Nazis, right? Like, well, even that's a dangerous position to take, because while that might be true, he's going in to fight Nazis, but there's other elements that might also be true. And what frustrates the situation is that many of those elements will contradict one another, because that's called being a human fucking being. That's what makes this a job, man. That's what makes this a job, right? Is that I'm not just sitting here being like, Putin's the best because he's going and he's going to fight those Nazis, and then we're going to get those Nazis, and we're going to pull out those Nazis, going to put them on trial, and then Putin will stand as the king of Russia, and he's the greatest king of Russia since Peter the Great. Like, that's not what I'm doing, right? Like, man, my job would be a lot easier if that's what I was doing, dude. My job would be a lot easier. I suspect that Putin will die in power. Like, I think that he will respond to the rise of opposition that stands against him, and that opposition will continue to build. I think that is true, but he will essentially die in office, and then the opposition might actually strike to seize power. And the narrative from the West will be something like, now that the oppressive might of Putin Now that Putin is gone, he can no longer actively oppress these brave, stalwart citizens, right? I suspect that there will be a lot of leftists, even in America, that talk that way about it. But, like, I think it's more rational to say that, like, when a ruler is in power, people will generally go along with it. Like we don't really, like, we're talking about monarchical, like, true Machiavellian politics when it comes to Putin, like, in the purest sense. That Putin is the king of Russia. Unless something extraordinarily dramatic happens, he will probably die the king of Russia. And it's only after a king is deposed that the populace will actually look around and say, okay, well, who's the new leader? And they'll take a look at their options, right? And that, to me, is when the opposition actually has its true moment to strike. That after Putin dies. And that's just how monarchical politics works, man. Like, this idea that we, like, elect a new guy every 4 years, like, that's a very North American phenomenon. It's a very North American phenomenon. Even the old parliamentary democracies in the United Kingdom and France and Germany and all this kind of stuff, like, even they don't, like, expect to see that kind of turnover, right? And the idea of, like, term limits, of, like, oh, you can only have 2 terms, like, that's a very foreign and abstract concept to how politics has always worked. So we're the oddballs. Like, we're the oddballs in this conversation. And that makes it difficult. That makes it really hard to have rational conversations about power. And because we're the weirdos. And we think we're normal, which makes it even better. For a new socialism supports the preservation of private property and seeks to form a mixed economy with the state support for small and medium-sized business based on Lenin's new economic policy. Yeah. Putin is funny. I like how he jokes. Yeah, he's a dude. Like, he's just a guy. That's the other part of it. He's just like a guy, right? Like, he's just this guy who, if you go and watch, Putin does this tour around North America and, like, shakes hands with all the leaders of the world when he gets into power. And he really does look like, I can't believe I'm here. Like, he's doing the tour and he's shaking everybody's hands and he's like, wow, you're the Queen of England. Like, he's got that kind of vibe about him where he's just like, he's shaking the president's hand. He's like, like, this guy might as well have been, like, taking out a phone and like snapping selfie shots. Like, and like sending up Twitter being like, hey, it's the Queen of England. Oh shit, it's the Prime Minister of Germany. Like, this was Putin. This was Putin that whole time. Like, for real. Like, and he's all, like, dressed up all the time. Like, really, really dressed up. You can see that he's nervous meeting these people. You can see it all over, right? It's actually kind of adorable, right? Like, that he looks in over his head. You know? When is war acceptable? When fighting capitalism. I mean, Nazism, certainly, dude. That's what people don't get. The U.S. can invade anything but itself for anyone else? Yeah. Imagine if Russia balkanized. You could fit, like, 15 countries in Russia. Well, that's the goal, right? Like, the goal is to balkanize Russia. Like, you see these lines, right? Each one of these is a province, right? And, like, really think about this. So, like, compare Estonia is a good comparison, right? Estonia is its own country, right? Well, right there, right here. This region's another Estonia. You can just peel that right off, right? Just peel that off, right? Peel it off, right? That's the goal, is to just peel these territories off, right? And just because they're part of Russia now doesn't mean they'll continue to be part of Russia. Ukraine used to be part of Russia, right? Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia used to be part of Russia, right? Kazakhstan used to be part of Russia. Like, all of these territories used to actually be part of Russia. They're not now. So if these aren't part of Russia, well, then this whole region could not be part of Russia, right? Why is this region part of Russia, right? This is the way NATO thinks. Like, they want to peel this all apart. They want to tear this all apart and let them all be independent states, which is how they describe it. Like, that's the goal. That's the goal. And the only real reason why like Russia looks very big and imposing, but a lot of this territory is not usable. Like a lot of, like, that's the reason why, like, take a look at the border here, right? Like this big ass, like, nobody is sitting here being like, boy howdy, do we ever need to get our hands on like Verkostjasnukistan, right? Like, nobody cares. Why? Because there's nothing here. You can't use it. It's not really good land, right? Like, there's no vast resources to be exploited or anything. So it's just this like swath of land that exists, but we can't capitalize it. So who gives a shit? And also, like, it's cold. No one lives there, right? No one fucking lives there. Like this territory up here is like in line with like Nineveh, right? And Yukon, and is worse in many areas. So this idea that like Russia is this giant imposing this, like, yeah, like this is bullshit. Like, this is bullshit. Like, the real true heart of Russia, and what makes it very threatening for Putin, is right in here. Like, that's Moscow, dude. Like, that's their capital, right? Can you imagine if Ukraine joined NATO? Fucking nuke, like, fucking, you could put, like, literally right fucking here, you could put a military center to be able to shoot rockets at fucking Moscow. No, bro. Like, no. Do you think Putin cares about elections? I literally call him the king of Russia. I don't know what you need, but no, I don't think Putin cares about elections. Putin has bureaucratically installed himself as the leader of Russia until he dies. Like, I think he cares about elections, unless you're talking about international elections, because Georgia showed very clearly that he does, like, very clearly. Like, he went in after they had their revolution to get rid of the NATO coup, right? There was a coup in NATO. NATO inspired a coup in Georgia. The people themselves, 3 years later, during the Rose Revolution, overthrew that leadership with the help of Russia, right? And then the UN oversaw, with Russia and the United States, incidentally, a democratic election that everybody said was legit. So I do think Putin cares about elections internationally, and incidentally, I think he does care about elections domestically, because it shows you where the people are, right? But he's the king. Like, he's the king of Russia. Like, he can't be deposed. Like, well, I mean, he could be deposed, obviously, but like, when the elections occur in Russia, his authority is not what's in question. He's the Tsar. Like, he's the king of Russia. And the elections are for positions like prime minister. And he pays attention to those, and he cares about those. For sure he does. Like, those people are key figures within the government that he has to interact with and have relations with. Right? Like, it's not as clear cut as all this. Like, it's not as simple as, like, you know, I know I'm saying glibly that Putin is like the king, but like, there's an entire apparatus underneath that needs to be stable for him to continue ruling in this manner, right? And there are elections that do occur that are completely legitimate. Like, the elections of the position of prime minister in Russia are legitimate elections, right? They're just not the election. They're just not an election for the leader of the country, because the leader of the country is Putin, who is a king. Which is wild, man. The more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more I'm just like, Jesus Christ. There is literally a king with nukes. That's like some sci-fi shit. That's just some sci-fi shit right there. I just found an article that talks about the size of the Azov battalion, which is estimated to be up to 10k people, and I posted an article on Discord. Thanks, bud. I'll take a look at that while here. I mean, that might be the article you're talking about, right? I'm a bit skeptical given the source. Radio Free Europe, I'm very... But I have a very touch-and-go relationship with the Radio Free crowd. I mean, it was the Radio Free Asia was the one that was disseminating the lies about the Uyghur genocide, right? I like when you talk about balls. Thanks, David. What were Biden's speech about that? I've lost the thread of that, but I don't know what that refers to. Is Stand With Ukraine kind of ableist? Oh, yeah, I see where you're coming from, Major. I hadn't even thought about it. Yeah. Does sort of have that vibe. It has a kind of thoughtlessness about it, doesn't it? Did you see the Ron DeStanek hot mic telling students to take off their masks? I mean, we're already doing that. Like, that's another thing that's happened in all of this, Vince, is that we are, the Ukrainian war has essentially washed away COVID, right? That COVID has faded into the background. It's now just like a little, like, hum in the background, right? The Ukrainian war has taken that away, cleansed COVID from the palate, which people wanted. Like, people wanted a palate cleanse. People wanted this to go away, right? They want it to be done. And, like, now it's just, now we've moved on. And we'll move on from this, too. Watch what happens. In 2 weeks' time, maybe even less, we'll have moved on from this to something else, right? The Ukrainian crisis will, as far as America is concerned, be over, right? Putin, of course, will still be like moving forward with trials and stuff, but the Americans aren't going to report on that. They don't give a fuck about any of that. Would you go on Twitch or would you prefer to stay on YouTube? I mean, you can stream on both. And that's sort of the goal. I just really want to hit 1,000 on YouTube first. That's really what it is. Before I start thinking about expanding or getting anywhere, I want to succeed here first. That I think is really what it comes down to. Heard of Belinda Carahalios, the MP from Cambridge, calling out Ford accepting Ukrainians and they are not fully vaccinated, but he's willing to discriminate on unvaccinated Canadians? Yeah, dude. Like, it's just all fucking nonsense. Hey, Nut Milk, how you doing, bud? Any updates with Ontario? Writ is going to drop, so end of next month. Meanwhile, NDP and Libs are as boring as ever. Del Duca more active on Twitter. ONDP is silent. Yeah, you're nailing it, Vince. Like, that's essentially the critique, right? Like, the NDP is going to lose this because they suck, right? They don't know how to campaign. Like, that's really what it comes down to. The NDP don't really understand how to campaign. And Ford does. Ford's life is a campaign. Like, that's the reason he's so good on the campaign trail, is because that's how he lives his life. So it's like a continuation. Right? He's just going around glad-handing, trying to solve people's problems directly, right? All this kind of stuff, while simultaneously systemically undercutting them. Like, that's how Ford rolls, and people are too stupid to realize it. No, it's in my eyes, it's likely that Del Duca will get more power in this election than the NDP, just because they're so bad. People need to quit claiming that Trump didn't start any wars. Oh, okay. He started the Persian Gulf crisis and started a trade war against China, which he lost. Keeping us honest, Mock. Thanks, bud. You're right. You are right. I don't know, like, the Persian Gulf crisis, you're talking about the assassination of that general, right? In Iran. You're right, dude. Like, and I should step down from that position. You're quite right. Like, Trump, but I think what I'm trying to get at when I say that is not that he didn't start any wars. It's just that he didn't, like, expand anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, it, and maybe that's an incorrect statement too. But I guess at this stage, like, where can America expand its wars? So it's like giving credit to somebody for not doing something that's impossible to do in the first place. Oh, fuck. It's so fucked up. Thanks for that comment, Mocked. I do appreciate it. Keep me honest, man. Remember to like and subscribe, comrades. Yeah, Patreon in the description, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, no war but class war. Is Russia actually that big, or is the map projection used? No, Russia's big, dude. Like, Russia's fucking big. Like, it's no joke, town. Like, if it wasn't for the size that of Russia, Canada would be the largest country. So, oh yeah, fair enough, Mocked. Fair enough. You got me. I've been run through. let's see if we've got any other news. Trucker convoy protest in Washington, D.C. flops as no one shows up. Straight up, just like they wanted to do a trucker rally at the... Get the fuck out of here. Washington Monument failed to materialize as just a handful of protesters showed up at the event. The National Park Service had given permission for the demonstration at the Sylvan Theater, and organizers expected several thousand people. But in the end, there was more press and police at the event than protesters. Where are the trucks? Organizer Kyle Sefik asked during his speech. He's an MMA fighter, independent candidate for governor in Maryland, also the organizer of Freedom Convoy USA 2022, which was due to arrive in D.C. on Tuesday, but was scrapped when just 5 trucks showed up in Las Vegas. Ouch. Ouch. So, that might just be the end of it, right? Like, that might just be the end of it. Unless, so I think the trucker convoy thing has dissipated. That energy has gone. But it'll probably loop back around. We'll see that again maybe 1-2 years from now. Right? Like, that's what I expect to see with the trucker convoy stuff. Like, don't think we've seen the last of these trucker convoys. Just touching base on this, if you've heard anything about the Russian bombing of a Holocaust memorial in Ukraine, absolutely false. The Russians bombed a radio tower that was something like 300 meters away from the Holocaust memorial, but they didn't damage the Holocaust memorial. I've bookmarked this because I think it's important, because that kind of narrative, Russians bomb Holocaust memorial, is going to be propagated by those people who are trying to paint Putin as a Nazi, which that's definitely something that is happening. And Putin's not a Nazi. Like, you can call him an opportunist if you want. You can call him, like, he's a Tsar for sure, and he views himself that way, but he's fucking not a Nazi, dude. 47 Canadians charged in sweeping global child sex abuse investigation. Oh, yeah, I can absolutely do that, bud. I gotta organize this shit, dude. I'm like the least organized person in the world. Discord. And I'll even, for the people who are not subscribers, and if you're not a subscriber, it's only $1, right? Think about jumping in. Whataboutism is a common misspelling of damning evidence that Western powers are lying about the motives and values. Thanks, Caitlin. Caitlin Johnstone, absolutely powerful voice in the conversation. Absolutely powerful voice in the conversation. This is something that, man, I'm going to keep my eye on this big time. Because, like, an alliance of this sort, right? An alliance of this sort, very powerful. Very powerful. Like, as I was saying before, the connection between China and India would be incredible. India has historically gone along with America, right? So, but I think that Putin and China too have got to start pitching to India that, like, hey, like, these Westerners are gonna fuck you over. Like, they look at what they do. Look at what they've done in your own history. Like, the history between India and Britain is crazy. Like, it's brutal. That's where the figure Gandhi comes from. Like, it's always been a bit odd. Well, I shouldn't say that, actually. It isn't that odd. Like, India is very concerned about the rise of China because of China's proximity to it, right? Like, this is a very scary thing for India, for sure. And there have been, like, regional border conflicts between China and India. So it's not like they have this, like, clean history. It's not like the Chinese are looking at India and, like, bowing respectfully, and the Indians are turning around and bowing respectfully to one another. There's been some conflict. There's been some stuff that's happened for sure. But I think that what the Chinese and probably Russia need to convince India of is that these regional border disputes can be resolved without escalation, and those regional border pursuits do not overwhelm the existential threat that is the United States and Europe. Like, these guys represent a massive existential threat to world peace, like, without a doubt. These are the Nazis on the stage. Like, you want to talk about who the Nazis are in the conversation, you're looking at these guys right here. These guys especially. Like, the United States, definitely, 100%. But certainly Europe is playing its part in all of this. Like, I don't know what we need to, like, say to be convinced of this anymore. That, like, the United States is obviously the Nazis on the world stage. Like, Iraq, Afghanistan, like, this whole fucking region. Like, this whole fucking region. They've, like, launched a crusade, for God's sakes. Like, what do you need? I don't know what you need at this stage. Just letting you know, John, there's a chance I can't be a subscriber soon because I'm running out of money. I appreciate that, Eric, bud. Don't even worry about that at all, bud. And thanks for letting me know, okay, bud? While EI still haven't solved my bloody case, it's been since December. Can't receive any more income. They keep BSing me the entire time. One issue after the other. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, Eric. I know exactly what you're talking about, dude. They keep trying to avoid paying me. The only reason I can sustain myself right now is because my church is sustaining me. Jesus Christ, Eric. Oh, dude, cut your payment now. Just cut your payment now, okay, bud? Like, don't feel like you need to keep giving me money, okay? And all of that because I'm going to school and the EI government doesn't like paying people to go to school. Yeah, of course. Educating citizens has no value, right? There's no value in having educated citizens. Like, I know I keep asking you guys for money, and I know that I keep saying, like, hey, like, support leftists and all that kind of stuff, but, like, if it's causing you actual difficulty, like, don't. Like, please, for the love of God. Ugh. What a situation, man. What a world we live in. Mario Benavides. Don't know if I've ever seen you here, bud. If you talk the way you do on here in the countries you admire, you'd be imprisoned. How ironic is that? I mean, if I talked the way I do on here in the countries you admire, you'd be imprisoned? I mean, no. Like, people talk this way on RT television all the time, bud. Like, that's kind of an embarrassing comment, honestly. Like, have you even watched, like, Chinese media? Have you even watched these things? Like, I'd actually be quite at home, I think, on Chinese media or on Russian television. That just tells me you don't actually know what you're talking about, bro. Like, can you give me examples of television personalities being imprisoned in Russia or China? Or, like, I mean, you can give examples of that in, like, Iraq or Afghanistan, like the war-torn nations, because they're fucking in the middle of a war. Rules are different when you're actually literally in the middle of a war. But, like, watch some Russian television. I don't know what to tell you, man. Man, what an incredible time. It's wild to see the war front advance and to see the war machine continue building itself as regular citizens are struggling to pay their bills. Right? Like, 50% of Canadians are saying that they are struggling with the cost of living. Like, 50% is not a small fucking number. And we're doing literally nothing about it. Like, we're doing literally nothing about it. We're not even making a plan to do anything about it. We're simply not taking the question seriously. We're straight up just not actually dealing with the reality of the situation at all. Like, this is why Andrea Horwath is going to lead. This is why Andrea Horwath is going to lose this election, right? Because she's just not rising to the occasion, right? 50% of people Yeah. Oh, poor Alexander Solenskin was an open and volatile anti-Semite, was sent to Gulag for suggesting full military alliance with Nazi Germany. Boo-hoo. Yeah, exactly, dude. Like that. Like Mocked is nailing it, dude. Like just like, oh no, Nazis got fucked over. Yeah, okay. But my Falun Gong media and my sex bet YouTubers told me Winnie the Pooh bad. Yeah, exactly. Like literally like racial purity cults and like literal Nazis getting chased out of the country, and that's the same. Like that's the same as what I'm doing, right? Like, ugh. And we're just ginned up for war all the time. We're just ginned up for it. We just love it. We love it. Like, and I really think this is something that we've got to really embrace and accept about our culture and who we are as a people. Like, we love war. We love war. That we actually are not interested in a peaceful world as a people. We're not actually interested in a peace. Like if we managed to live in a world where there was no war and everything was peaceful and sustainable and stable and everything was fine, we would go to war simply to go to war. We don't need a reason. We don't need to benefit from it. We don't need any of those things to exist. We want to go to war because we love war. We're willing to pay for it. We're willing to extract any cost for doing so. We're willing to do any, but I'm talking about any kind of war, like any kind of war, Major. We love war. We love it. And like, we really got to come to terms with it as a people. Like, I don't think that Westerners, especially North Americaners, can live in peace. I don't think we can. Like, if we actually managed to get to a point where there was peace and we weren't waging international wars, we would just have a war with ourselves. Because that's how much we love war. Like we want it. We crave it. It supersedes our ability to think rationally or consciously. Like it's like a thrall. It has a thrall over us. It's like a god that is just singing a siren song, and we have to answer it. And that's obviously true, because that's where we funnel all our energy and power and potential. When there are obvious things that we could do to improve the quality of life for our citizens, yeah, war sells, dude. Think about the media. They have every reason. People watch wars. Wars are popular, right? Wars are popular. We love war. We love watching it. We love doing it. We love engaging in it. Like we all of it, like all of it, we love it, and the, for God's sakes, like a huge section of the video games are about going to war, right? Like your Call of Duties and your even your Fortnites and all this kind of stuff. Like it's all about going to war. We go to war in our digital hallucinations as entertainment. Like, we love war. We love it. And that's just true. Like, I'm not one of these guys that's trying to say that, like, video games are warping the minds of Americans and with these we got to censor these video games. Like, no. Because I understand that video games are an expression of humanity. That the video games aren't what's distorting humanity. It's that the video games are an expression of humanity. Right? And like we're not producing games that are well, I mean, we are producing games that are about building stuff and all this kind of stuff. Like those games exist, certainly, but the most prominent ones, right? The biggest ones are war. Always war. There's always someone to fight. There's always some front. There's always something to shoot. There's always you get to choose a side. Yeah, Fallout Games has a famous line: "War never changes." Yeah. Hey, New Perspective, how you doing, bud? George Carlin. Yeah, George Carlin, dude. George Carlin was like really hot on this idea. Like he has that really, really great one that he did in like the early 90s where he said we can't build a car worth a damn, we can't educate kids, we can't do anything, but we can bomb the shit out of your country. We can bomb the shit out of your country. Like, George Carlin knew what was up, bud. Like, he knew what was up, and he was spitting it. He was spitting the truth. Yep. We are warlike people, man. And like, what does it take? What does it take for us to realize that this is a dead end? Like, it is like an evolutionary dead end. That we have fallen into this pattern of war as a survival strategy, but now it's become it's working against us. Now it's no longer facilitating our survival, and it's actually working against our survival. Like, need I bring up that the number one offender in the climate change conversation is the United States military? Just by moving its shit around. Just by, like, fueling these fucking things, man. Like, we can't seem to stop. And we don't seem to care to stop. Right? I think the true dark heart of the American empire and the capitalist death cult is that we love war for war's sake. That the idea of just putting down our arms, like we can't even think that way, because what's the response to that, right? Oh, well, if we stopped doing war, then someone would do war against us. And of course we think that way, because that's exactly what we would do, right? If a neighboring country just laid down its arms, we'd move in and do war, because that's what we would do. And we think that way because we are a warlike people. Should we change this level of war, or can we? That's the bigger question, I think, is the can we? I mean, should we? Obviously we should. Like, obviously. Like, if you write out, like, what the situation is and think about it for 30 seconds, you are going to conclude that we should change this. Like, we are fueling a war machine that is destroying us environmentally. The planet itself is destroying us because of the existence of this military force. And then on top of that, we continuously poke and prod nuclear powers in order to foment further war, while simultaneously destroying the entire rest of the planet with war. That is all pointless and fruitless and always fails. America has lost every war it's fought since World War II. And World War II, it wasn't even its victory. Like, it opportunistically came in at the end. Like, they only love war when it's not in their country. I disagree, Ken. I disagree. The American Civil War, they love that war. They love that war, dude. The Confederate flag, the South will rise again. They're angling for a civil war. The January 6th insurrection, or whatever you want to call it, right? Like, they love it. I'm deadly serious. Like, if the American military suddenly evaporated somehow, and there was general peace in the world, right? Little border scuffles, things like this, sure. But, like, more or less, everything like de-escalated and everybody was just trading with one another, and it was just humans being humans, well, the Americans would go to war with itself because they love it, they want it, they crave it, it exists in them, they want it. And so the bigger question is, can we? I don't know. Can we? How do we change that? Because I think that this warring ethos, this warring desire, this desire for war that exists in the heart of Westerners manifests itself as like a pressure, as the same way that like we have to pee. Like it's like something that comes up in us and says, if I don't actually fight someone, if I don't actually do damage and cause violence in the world, then my own body is going to bottle it up, and then it'll explode that way anyway. Like, it really is like something that seems to exist inside of us, and we can't just think it away or wish it away. That there has to be some kind of catharsis. And we've attempted to create catharsis in different ways. Like, I think the Olympics are a way to try to find that catharsis. Soccer and sporting events are a way to find that catharsis, right? But I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough. I think that what we are seeing, especially manifesting in American football, and like the absurdity of the scale of like the pageantry that surrounds it, is that it's not enough of a catharsis for people, that they need blood. They need blood, and they want it. They crave it. Russia recently said of nuclear war, why do we need a world of we don't have Russia? I wonder if the nihilist capitalists feel the same. Why do we need a world if we don't have capitalism? Yeah, I mean, like, no, it's just crazed, dude. Have a good evening, David. Remember, it's the only country in the world that guns are a human right and is constitutionally entrenched. The American conservatives believe they can solve anything with violence. Yeah. Well, but like, I think it even goes further than that. I think that like violence justifies itself in the American ethos. That they really are just like, oh, he's doing violence, that makes him a better person, right? That like, they don't view violence as like a sometimes necessary evil, or they don't view violence as like a unfortunate thing that occurs. Like, I think that they genuinely, like, why are we worshiping serial killers? Why are we worshiping serial killers? Like, you've seen this, right? Like, you've noticed this. I've fucking noticed this, right? How Netflix and all of these documentaries and podcasts are popping up, and it's all documentaries of literal fucking serial killers. And as they're talking about these serial killers, where they're talked about with like this kind of like, oh, he was so smart and charismatic, and what a beautiful person. And yes, he killed a lot of people, but look at how intelligent he was, right? And like, you've got figures in the conversation like Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory, a literal sociopath. The newest iteration from Benedict Cumberbatch of Sherlock, he was literally a sociopath. Like, we keep, like, Disney keeps trying to rehabilitate their psychopaths. Like, Cruella de Vil got a rehabilitation recently. Like, they keep trying to convince us that psychopaths and sociopaths are good, right? Like, and we're supposed to look at these serial killers with like kind of like a like they're scary, they're threatening, but they're so handsome and smart, right? Like, there is an understanding that they're dangerous, but it's the danger that makes them good. And our culture seems to love that. Like, we have this respect for serial killers. We respect them. We think they should be in prison, certainly. We certainly think that they're dangerous, but we respect them. And we honor them. Right? Yeah, cruel and evil are literally in her name. She wears the skins of puppies. Why? Yeah. Yeah, and then of course they couldn't actually manage it, right? They couldn't actually present her as the psycho that she actually is. They had to like revise her history basically and pretend like she wasn't this like absolute demon. Like Cruella de Vil is one of the like great villains of Disney lore, right? Like she didn't have a lot of power. Like the scale of her evil, like the stakes are relatively low. Like she's not like trying to dominate the world or anything, or even a country or a town or anything. She literally just wants to kill puppies. Like that's pretty psycho. Like that's pretty psycho. But she still is like this great villain in the lore, and for them to turn around and try to pretend like, oh, actually Cruella was just misunderstood. Like we're supposed to respect her. Like that's what they're trying to get us to do. They're trying to get us to look at figures like Ted Bundy and respect them. Right? Yes, dangerous. Absolutely should be locked away. But, you know, you got to respect the effort. Like, this is what it is to be like an American citizen, a Canadian citizen, is to live in a society that continuously worships and loves extreme violence. What a great question, Ken. What a great question. Why isn't China war hungry then? Is it because US was founded on genocide? I mean, one would think that would play a part. I think also China is older, right? China has had lots of war in its history. Like, you can't deny it. Like, there's been lots of warring. There's been warlord periods, right? There's been eras of empire that dismantle, and then you have warlords that pop up, followed by another empire period, right? And so the history of China is like that, where it like forms up into an empire, like the Ming dynasty or the Qing dynasty or the Qing dynasty or any of these kinds of things, and then that eventually falls apart, and then you have petty warlords for a period of time, and then one of those petty warlords ends up either overwhelming all of them, or they create an alliance that it then spreads out and takes over all of China. And so certainly this exists throughout Chinese history, a history of warfare. And one might argue that a reason why China, and like, for God's sakes, China, like the Communist Party of China Mao was a war general. Like he fought a war, right? And the imperialists that existed throughout China as well. And there's an argument to be said that like China can't really do war given this threatening psychopath that they have at their doorstep, right? And so they went, like, America is allowed to do war, right? Because no one can really check it. Like, if it wants to go into the Middle East and destroy it, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do? Right? Like, if it wants to go in here and blow this place up, what are you going to do about it? China can't do that. Like, China can't do that. For God's sakes, everyone's losing their minds because China is going to take Taiwan eventually. Everybody knows this is going to happen, right? And everybody's losing their fucking minds about it. Can you imagine if China did something, like, actually illegitimate? Like, instead of, like, reconstituting one of their provinces, ending the war that Mao fought, right? Instead of any of that, like, imagine they attacked the Philippines. People would lose their fucking minds. People would lose their fucking minds. It would just be a catastrophe on a scale we've never even thought about. So there is a degree that China is enclosed, right? And it's enclosed by who? The psychopath. This becomes the question. If the United States is not involved in the conversation, if the United States just doesn't exist, let's just cut the line here and pretend, just as a thought experiment, that this is the world. That even South America doesn't exist. Forget about it, right? This is the world. There's the line. That's the whole world. Is Russia and China and Africa, like, are these guys committed to the same kind of warfare on the same scale that the Americans are? Is this a Western issue, or is this a human issue? Like, that's a question that I think is worth paying a lot of attention to. And it isn't like China and the Middle East and well, Europe, for God's sakes, don't have long histories of warfare as well. It's just that there's this like looming psychopath in the conversation, right? And so, and I do think that the U.S., the fact that it was founded on genocide and slavery, right? That plays. Like, that plays for sure. That definitely exists within the consciousness of the Western spirit, without a doubt. And we've built this ideology of conflict, right? Like, competition breeds innovation, right? That's an ethos of conflict. China had the Silk Road. I don't think ever expanded outside China, and that's all its history. And that's a good point too, Ken, because China's, like, America's ethos is, we're great, so we're going to spread America throughout the rest of the world, right? We're going to make the rest of the world better because they'll become more like us. That's always been America's ethos. Whereas China's ethos is kind of like, we're great, so keep the fuck away from us. You know what I mean? Like, China's like, we're great, so, you know, that's great. You be great too, okay? You go over there and you be great too. And that's more or less been China's ethos. And you're right. Like, a lot of the warring that exists within China has always been internal, right? Like, these borders that exist more or less, and there are different time periods didn't have, like, for example, like this area, right, or this area here. Like, Tibet wasn't always part of China. Like, these outlying regions here especially. But certainly when you look at this part of China, like, this has always been China. Like, always this has been China, right? And so all of their wars are just kind of internal and dealing with each other. And like I always say, right, the hardest thing for a people to do is to deal with themselves. Right? The hardest thing for a person to do is to deal with themselves. DPR downed 2 Takayu tactical ballistic missiles over. I'm so the worst. Dukacheviska and Zugriz, fired by Ukrainian armed forces. The Tatra-U is huge. Oh yeah. Like. And you know what that means, though, Major? Like, this is the thing. Like, the situation that the Ukrainians find themselves in, or that the Nazis find themselves in, they can't really fire these missiles successfully, right? All of these weapons and everything that are getting sent into Ukraine, it's a lost cause for these guys, right? They don't have air supremacy. They don't have any way to gain air supremacy. They don't have any way to fight back aerially. And so if they shoot rockets, like if they shoot missiles, well, that's just a trace right to where they are. Like, you know what's going to happen right after that? So they shoot the rocket, right? It goes, let's just use this map. So let's say Kiev shoots a rocket at Moscow, right? This isn't what happened, but just for ease of presentation. Kiev shoots a rocket at Moscow. So Moscow shoots it down, right? Well, that missile has a trajectory. It creates a trail. And at the end of that trail is the machine responsible for shooting the missile. So Moscow's just going to send a plane over and drop a bomb right fucking there. Like, this is why these Nazis are so fucked. Like, they can't actually shoot back. Russia will be, well, I doubt it, honestly. Russia will be seizing those guns. Like, Russia, that's what's so fucking funny about all of this, like, in a grim kind of way, is that all of the arms and everything that's getting sent into Ukraine right now, you're basically you might as well just ship them directly to Moscow. Like, they're gonna seize them. Like, they're gonna get those guns. Like, like, really think about how desperate Zelensky is to distribute weapons into the populace the way that he did. Right? Like, here's a guy who sent a tweet out to his own people saying, everybody come and get a free gun. We've got to fight against these Russians. Everybody come. Get your free gun here. Free guns for everyone. Get your free gun. And then you could show up and they just handed you a gun. Right? This is extreme desperation. Like, it doesn't get more desperate than that. And the result of it has been internal fighting. The result of it has been Nazi groups and gangs fighting amongst each other. Like, it's a total fucking catastrophe, born of this overt, intense desperation. And this act that you're talking about here, Major, is itself an act of complete and total desperation. Clearly, like, some of these Nazi forces being like, well, we've got these missiles. Like, we've got them. We should at least try to use them. But they know how this goes. Like, you don't just, like, shoot a rocket and everybody goes, oh, where'd that rocket come from? They know where the rocket came from because they can see it. You can see the trajectory. You can see the fucking trail. Like, that site that rocket gets shot from is going to get blown up. Like, they're probably trying to blow it up right now. They probably already have blown it up. Given the time, like, by the time that news hits us, they've already acted on it. So, like, these Nazis are desperate. They're completely desperate. I'm seeing reports so in the Donbass region, right? The two is Donetsk and Luhansk, and I'm already seeing reports saying that Luhansk has already fallen, that the Nazis have been cleared out of there, that Mariupol has already been seized, right? So and they're moving towards Donetsk. And when they move into Donetsk, Russell Bentley's going to have something to say about it, right? So, like, these Nazis are fucking desperate because they know what the end of this road is for them. Like, they know. And moreover, they know that NATO's not sending troops. And that's what they need. Like, that's what they need. It doesn't matter how many guns you send these guys anymore. Doesn't matter, right? A man can only hold one gun. So it doesn't matter if you have a warehouse full of guns, right? If you have 100,000 men and they already all have guns, and you get another crate of guns, they're going to be like, okay, I guess. What they need is troops. But nobody's going to actually commit troops to this. Like, no, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, like, none of these guys, Germany, right? America certainly isn't. Right? They're not committing troops. Right? These are the troops. The Nazis they've been funding. These are the troops. And we've already seen reports that, what were the places? Do I have that still up? We've already seen reports that say that some of the more, I mean, we've already got, like, the Belarus Nazi traveled in Ukraine. So this Nazi's already been captured by DPR forces. This is one of the guys that's going to be put on trial at The Hague. Like, that's a deadly certainty. He's already captured, being reported. Where was this? We're already seeing countries saying that, we're already seeing countries say that they're not willing to send some of the high-grade military, like, so they're not willing to send fighter jets, shit like that. And if you're not willing to send fighter jets, if you're not willing to actually challenge the air superiority of the Russians, it's over. Like, it's over, man. Like, Zelensky's going to be captured. That to me is just a matter of time, right? Zelensky is going to be captured, or he'll flee. Right? That's also a possibility. A lot of these Nazis are going to get captured. Many have already fled. Like, in my view, the only reason it's not happening faster is because the Russians don't want to destroy the whole place. They're not like Americans. They don't want to just reduce the place to rubble, right? Like they want to be tactical and they want to be surgical, but it is like a big giant monster. Like it is like a big giant monster just stomping through your city, right? Like you can only go so hard, so fast, you know? And you got a big giant monster stepping around your city. It doesn't matter how careful it's trying to be. Like the analogy that I like to think about it, it's like being a beekeeper. I was a beekeeper for a year. And as a beekeeper, you don't want to kill bees. Like it's not what you set out to do, right? And you would like to be delicate to ensure that bees don't die. But the hard reality about being a beekeeper is that you kill bees. Just because they are this big and you are as big as you are. Like, just the movement of your body, the movement of the hives and the boxes will kill bees. You will do it. It's an inevitability. And it doesn't matter how careful you are. It's going to happen. And I kind of view that the same way. Like, if you move a military in and start doing military, it doesn't matter how careful you are. You're going to blow some shit up. Some shit's gonna get blowed up. You should see Russia, Putin versus exhibition of weapons seized from Syrian militants on roughly. They are melting some of this down? You're talking about the Syrian militants, though. Yeah. I mean, they'll do some of it for show, for sure. Like, they'll do some of it as a performance. Like, absolutely. We're melting down these guns to symbolize the end of this Nazi regime. For sure. Well, I gotta sneeze. Come on. I hate it. I hate it when that happens. Oh, the worst. Oh, the worst. Oh, that's the worst. Well, not the worst, but you know what I mean. If he flees, it will be funny because right now he's hailed as an ideal leader fighting with his own people. And in some way, I kind of want him to do that. Otherwise, if he gets captured, he will become a martyr. Oh, man. I don't... I think Zelensky should go on trial. Like, the Nazis can have their fucking martyr, right? Fine. Like, I don't care who the fucking Nazis martyr. Like, Zelensky should go on trial for his many crimes, like many crimes. Like this whole situation is unbelievably criminal. Like if Putin is smart. He should fund like a Hollywood level film about this Ukrainian crisis and really show Zelensky as the clown that he is. Like, cause he's a fucking clown, dude. Like some of the decisions that he's been making are like arming the populace in the way that he did. Like it's clown shoes, dude. Like it's clown shoes. Like holy fuck. And the like, how did you think it was gonna go? The part that I find frustrating right now is the West is reporting that Ukraine is winning the war. Of course they're doing it. And only round one article that says Putin will win the war because Putin has never lost a war. I mean, here's the truth that as I see it. So here's my position. I shouldn't say the truth. That's not fair. But yeah, because conservatives understand war, right? Like they understand like, and like, there are people, like capitalists want to know what's actually happening because they want to know where to invest their money, right? Like they want to know what side to pick. They want to know where to put their cash and their capital, right? So they want to know the truth. They want to know what's going on. And like, because if Ukraine wins the war, then that means one thing. But if Russia wins the war, that means another, right? And here's what's just honest to God, like, I don't see how you can make the claim that Russia is going to lose this war. Like, problem for Ukraine number one. Russia has air superiority. Like, Russia's got fighter jets. There is no ghost of Kiev, right? It's total fucking nonsense, right? Russia has air superiority. They also have, like, a very significant technology advantage, right? Like, Moscow's not a fucking bullshit pushover place. Like, it's a major superpower. It's got heavy duty hardware, right? and it's been gearing up for this conflict for the last 8 years. But just basic reason. They don't have air superiority. Like, they can't even fight in the air. Like, your war is essentially over, right? Like, if you've got Russian fighter jets flying through the airspace completely unopposed, it is over. Like, this is more a mop-up than anything else. I saw this guy. There was a U.S. general who openly stated in Congress that he read Karl Marx and Lenin. Yeah, as they should. As everybody should. Like, it's frustrating that there's so many people in the conversation who actually refuse to read the literature. I would prefer to talk to a guy who read the literature and disagreed with it than somebody who is against me and they haven't read the literature. I would much prefer to have a conversation with someone who's read the literature and still disagrees with it. Because then at least I think we can have a common language to have a communication with, right? Although, you know, if you actually read Marx and Lenin and find yourself in disagreement with it, I'm a bit like, is that because you're a Nazi? Is that what's going on? So, so the Ukrainian military has two problems. They don't have air superiority, right? They don't have communications. Okay? One of the first things that Russia did, because they have air superiority, is they knocked out the communication centers around. That's where this Holocaust memorial, that's where the Holocaust memorial narrative came from. Yeah, I blame America for this whole crisis, for sure. That's fair. It's absolutely fair to say that, Yetis. Like, this situation did not need to happen. It did not need to exist. To me, that's just a fucking truism at this point. And so the Ukrainian Nazis don't have air superiority. They don't have communications. So that means that, like, if a squad goes out and tries to do something, it's going out and it's trying to do that. Like, it doesn't have these Nazis over here in Donetsk, they're not in communication with Kiev anymore. Like, the connection has been destroyed. Like, and finally, as Major just brought up, like, if these guys shoot rockets at Russia, those rockets get knocked down, and then there'll be a counteroffensive to destroy those locations. Right? Ukraine has no capability to do the same to Moscow. So even if this turns into a long, grueling, protracted war, what Ukraine needs in order to actually fight back and actually win is manpower. And they're not getting it. They're not getting it. So that's the end of it. Like, they're not going to get them. Like, Russia can literally keep its position here and drop bombs on them from the sky. Like, if it comes down to it. War's over. Like, game's over. Where does it say Russia has air superiority? I'm looking at an Al Jazeera market. Say they haven't mobilized them. No, but that's just it. Like, they don't have to mobilize them. Nor do they want to mobilize them. Like, I can't stress this enough. Like, the Russians don't want to drop fucking bombs on Ukraine from the sky. They're really not interested in it. Like, Moscow's moving around like a giant. Like, imagine a Godzilla creature, like a Godzilla-style monster, moving through a city, trying not to destroy shit. Okay? Do you believe it will be successful? Probably not. Like, at some point, that Godzilla creature is going to turn around and his tail's going to swipe the side of a building, and he'll go, ah! Right? Like, it's an inevitability. And, like, and you're right, Legondis. Like, they haven't actually mobilized their air force in order to start a bombing campaign or anything like that in Ukraine, because they don't need to. Because Ukraine doesn't have the capability. And they don't want to fucking wipe this place out. Like, Ukraine used to be part of Russia. Like, this is something that I think we got to really plant our feet on and remember. Ukraine used to be part of Russia. Like, in many ways, we're watching two brothers fight right now. Like, if Moscow's goal was to level Ukraine, it already would have happened. Like, no bullshit here. Like, we're talking about a country that defeated Hitler. We're talking about a country that mobilized a military force large enough to defeat the real fucking Nazis. The actual Nazis in World War II. You think they can't handle Ukraine? If they wanted to level Ukraine, it would have already happened. Like, no, let's not bullshit ourselves here. So the reality is that the reason why this conflict is taking as long as it is because the Russians are being delicate about it. As delicate as a giant monster in a city can be. Right? And no pretending, man. Like, that's why this sort of moment is dangerous no matter how you slice it. It's just like a military rolling through your streets. They're gonna blow something up even on accident. Just like, and that's where in the nuclear conversation, people who really study and pay attention to the nuclear war problem, like, their big thing is not someone will go nuts and then the nukes will get launched, right? Their big thing is like, one of these can go off on accident, bro. Like, we do not have like a perfect security network for this. Like, this shit can happen on accident. That's the big thing about the nuclear problem, right? Like, a moment like now is very like, oh my god, nukes and but the reality is like, a nuclear catastrophe could happen on accident. Like, we shouldn't have these things, dude. We just shouldn't have them. That the building of a nuclear bomb itself should be considered a war crime. Yeah, if they wanted to kill citizens, the West tries to claim they simply just use their jets. Or their fucking missiles. They've got missiles. Like, what, you think Moscow doesn't have missiles? They literally could just go... Like, they could wipe Kiev off the map. Like, literally, Kharkiv, like, all of these places. Like, if they wanted to, they wouldn't have to go into they don't need to put boots on the ground if their goal is just to destroy the place. They don't need to push in. They don't need troops. They don't need tanks. They don't need APCs. They don't need military hardware. They don't need any of that, right? They have missiles, and they got a lot of them. If their goal was simply to destroy Ukraine, boop. Would have already happened. That would have been their opening move. Like, yeah. Like, that's what I would have done. If my goal was to just destroy the place, that's what I would have done. And then you send people in to just fucking clear people up, right? If you actually think about that, is not how the West operates, because they would have sent the jets first and then go in. Yeah, exactly. Exactly as I just described, right? The American strategy is shock and awe, right? It is to come in and just blow the place up. Like, that's their opening move. And it's as stated in their fucking in their documents and military shit. Right? Their goal is to blow the place up and then send people in to mop up. Yeah, and just continually drop bombs. Yeah. Like, the thing that Americans don't want to see, because they know that this doesn't play well with the public, you don't want to see body bags. Like, you don't want to see the coffins with the flag draped over it. Like, you're not interested in that at all. Like, you want to see success, and success for America is explosions on other people's soil. Like, yeah. What a wild time, dude. And the importance of this particular war cannot be overstated, by the way. Like, this moment is actually it's reshaped how politics is going to work moving forward. That, and I've said it before, but it's worth restating, that Russia is now part of the global south. That's the real, like, end point of this. It looks like Moscow is still going to be able to sell gas to Berlin, right? Like, that's still going to happen through the Nord Stream pipeline, all that kind of stuff. Don't see any sanctions on that point because I think that would be too much for the citizens. But in terms of, like, the banking systems, in terms of international affiliation, in terms of connection, looks like Moscow's been cut right out. And so Moscow has to pivot where it's got to pivot. And where it's going to pivot? The global south, which is steadily building itself up after, hundreds of years of American warfare and destruction on their soil. And we just got to kind of pray that these sorts of events remain small scale and remain localized. Like, and hopefully pray that even the death cult isn't interested in a massive war. As long as the warring is between them and, like, small bullshit who gives a fuckistan, right? Like, the American economy really is getting to the point where, like, they're just going to build bombs and then drop them in, like, the desert somewhere, right? They'll just pick, like, this section of Texas, right, or whatever. Where do they typically drop bombs? American nuclear bomb testing site. The world's first nuclear explosion, blah, blah. Los Alamos. Here you go. So just, like, eventually what Americans will start doing, and I'm only saying this half jokingly. No, go away with this. Just show it to me. Come on. Oh, I hit the wrong button. I see what I did. Right? Manhattan Project, right? So eventually they'll just start dropping bombs here just to drop the bombs so that they can justify building more bombs, right? They'll just, like, they'll build a set of bombs and then they'll drop them in New Mexico and then they'll rebuild the bombs and then drop them in New Mexico, and this will be a job creation program, right? Like, this is how the American economy works. That, like, Raytheon and all these guys, like, they don't actually care where the bombs get dropped. They don't actually care what happens to the weapons. They're just the arms dealers, right? So they'll just sell them to the American military, and then the American military will go to fucking Albuquerque, New Mexico, and just drop bombs on it. And no one will care because they'll be out in the middle of the fucking desert or whatever. And if you actually say, like, hey, we should stop building bombs, it'll collapse the American economy. Because that's all they do. Heck, let's go to the absolute worst and just go to the line that Putin is actual dictator. It will mean that his opening move would simply drop nukes on Ukraine and wipe everything out and level everything out with radiation. Yeah, man, like, if Putin actually was crazed in the way that we think he was, like, I don't think he would be acting the way that he's acting. Like, I really don't. At least the opening move would be missiles. Like, at least. If he was this crazed lunatic that we all say, the opening volley would be missiles. Like, really think about what he's doing, right? He is putting his own citizens, he is putting Russian military personnel on a front line, right? Have we seen America do this ever? Like, when was the last time we saw America put, like, Americans on a front line? Probably just like Normandy, right? It's probably like the last time we've seen that. That everything has always been from there, just bombing campaigns. Like, and the Russians, while they have air superiority, while they have missiles and shit, right? They're sending troops in first. And anytime they do bomb anything, which they do, it's surgical strikes on critical military infrastructure, like communications towers, right? Armories, right? Warehouse deposits, things like this. So there just comes a point where I just start saying like when do I start to go bullshit, bullshit? And the wild thing to me is just how much the American people and the Canadian people are just all about it. Like, they're just all about it. Like, completely ignore our constant warring. Like, constant warring. No. The issue is that a major superpower fought back. We wanted to do war, and you guys aren't letting us. That makes you a dictator tyrant. Like... Ugh. Ugh. Quick pivot over here to Maxime Bernier, leader of the PPC. That's the far-right party that is coming up here in Canada. Canada has a fascist psychopath as a prime minister. I mean, blackface, right? Like, Trudeau wears blackface. And also just like... But is he a fascist psychopath? I really think that Trudeau is just like a racist haircut, right? Like that's what I would levy at him. Fascist psychopath seems to go too far. And a Nazi as a deputy prime minister, that's accurate. Yeah, she's definitely got like, if she's not a Nazi, she's definitely like Nazi adjacent, right? Like if she's not the person wearing the SS uniform in the bedroom, she sleeps with people who do. You know? Like that's where Chrystia Freeland is. They recently gave themselves extraordinary powers to crush peaceful dissidents. They did do that. But according to media talking heads, PPC threat is a threat to Canadian democracy. This is a brilliant tweet that is going to play hard. People are going to love this tweet. Like this, I see this spreading around. I think it's going to take a second lap, right? The right wing is absolutely in love with Maxime Bernier. Like, they really are. More and more people are gravitating towards him. The Conservative Party has had to swing to the right because of him, right? That they've rejected Aaron O'Toole. They see that the only path for them to get power is to actually swing to the right. Pierre Poilievre is responding to Maxime Bernier with a swing to the right because he knows that he can't bleed people off on the right and also seize power. And now I don't think there's a chance for reunification between the two bodies, because Maxime Bernier has got a taste for it now. And he's gaining momentum now and getting more votes now. And if he can manage to snag a seat, right? If he can manage to snag a seat, now we're talking, man. Now we're talking. Then he's serious. Like, then it becomes a serious thing that's occurring in Canadian politics. And what the Liberals do, right? And this is a great tweet for him, by the way, because it implies a denunciation of fascism and Nazism, right? Which sort of flies in the face of what his brand, what he's been labeled as, right? But if he's speaking out against fascists and Nazis, like Trudeau and Freeland, then he himself can't be a Nazi. Well, yes, he can. But we'll see how it all shakes out. But a powerful tweet. A powerful tweet. Right now, everyone is like, what is Putin's true goal? It's just insane instead of just listen to the damn guy. I mean, that's great, Eric. I think that is actually an interesting question to ask. Like, yes, listen to him. He wants to demilitarize Ukraine and denazify Ukraine. That's his Cassius Belli for moving in, right? And if that's what he does, then he looks great, in my opinion, right? If that's what he does, if he goes in and demilitarizes Ukraine and denazifies it, and then kind of fucks off and actually oversee, like he did in Georgia, oversees a oversees a democratic election that the UN and everybody says was good. Okay, interesting. Yeah, great. Super cool. Will that happen? It is a looming question mark that is hanging over Putin. What's next? And if what's next is like de-escalation and trials, then amazing, if you ask me. But maybe Putin gets a taste for war, right? Like war is it's a very sweet nectar, right? Maybe he starts to feel that, like, wait a minute, I actually got into Ukraine and I took that over pretty easily, right? I could just keep it. Yeah, well, hey, Moldova, what's up? Right? And then like 4 years later, he's moving into Moldova, right? Hey, what's up, Romania? Hey, what's up? Or maybe like the classic, right? Poland, right? Like that, or Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, right? It definitely could fall out that way too. It could, right? It could, and we shouldn't bullshit ourselves on it. So, like this is the thing about what Putin has done, is that it is dangerous, and it could become something bigger than it is. And so far so good. I mean, good. There's fucking Nazis in the conversation, but like, I don't want to tip over into apologetics. I think that's really what it comes down to. Like, I don't want to tip over into just like straight up like, no, Putin is good and what Putin does is good. Like we've got to be very skeptical of what Putin is doing, because I think that he is justified in what he is doing currently, but how he resolves this conflict is going to really be the proof in the pudding for me. And I think it's right for people to say, what's he going to do? I think it's right. Even the fucking liberal types, I think it's right to be like, okay, well, what's he going to do? Because what's he going to do? We don't know. I think Putin has an idea, but I don't think he knows how this all unfolds either, right? So, man, what a wild, like, if I was a ghost spirit, the place to be right now would be in Putin's like war rooms and things like this. Just be hanging around with Putin, just floating there, being like, what's Putin up to? What's Putin thinking? Maybe capture like a real quiet personal moment where he's, praying to whatever God he believes in, right? Just like a real, like he's beseeching the great powers. Anyway. Meanwhile, Biden's like cutting open a goat, getting its intestines out. Oh, great and powerful Moloch. You know what I'm talking about. People in our country identify as Ukrainian even though they have no connection for over a century, yet mixed blood claiming some affinity to a culture they don't participate in beyond to take out food. Here in Canada, there is a fairly strong, like, you're right, like that they are disconnected by like a generation at least, but the communities that exist have persisted as Ukrainian here in Canada. That like there are literally like Ukrainian communes throughout the prairies. So I definitely see where you're coming from, and there is a bit of that, but I also think like the Ukrainian communities have actually kept their Ukrainianism. One of the major parts I disagree with his statement is the peaceful protest. How is taking Ottawa as a hostage anything peaceful? And the part that frustrates me the most, at the same time, same people will speak against the Black Lives Matter's violent protest. Yeah, if I agree with it, it's a violent protest. If I disagree with it, it's a peaceful protest, or vice versa, right? If I agree with it, it's a peaceful protest, and if I disagree with it, it's a violent protest. That's a tale as old as time. That's so ubiquitous that I expect it, Eric. I expect it. Like, oh, the people, like, Black Lives Matter went out into the streets, and the right wing called it a violent protest. I'm like, yeah. And? Like, what? Of course they are. Like I don't even get my panties in a twist about that anymore. Like I don't even get up in arms about that shit anymore. It's just so rote. Like it's so expected. Like literally the day that the Black Lives Matter protests happened, you could like write down like, oh yeah, the right wing will think about it this way. These are the talking points. The left wing will talk about it this way. These are the talking points, right? Like they're so just rote at this point. And the Freedom Convoy was the same deal, right? We all knew what the talking points were going to be right from the outset, right? The whole like it's a far right fringe element thing. Like everybody was calling it that before Trudeau did, right? Like you just write them down. Anyway, all right, guys, we have hit the end of our time together. I really treasure these times that we have together, honestly, guys. You are the ones that are making it beautiful. Please like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff if you're still sticking around. Always remember, guys, you are a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the vain attempt that you'll never realize it and you'll just stay the good little commodity that you're supposed to be. Revolt, rebel, repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.